This guy is actually the reincarnation of the only hero who was capable of defeating the demon Erebos 5,000 years ago, but the crazy thing is nobody knows about it. Now he is living a fresh life at the academy, even though he's already mastered every type of magic. While studying the history books on ancient heroes, he realizes that all his old records have vanished and he got 0 credit for taking out Erebos. So he heads to the Hero Academy and begins smashing every single record all over again to reclaim the legacy that was wiped from history. No matter how strong the other students were, he completely crushed them in the exams. On top of that, our main character was able to summon a tiny little pet that transformed into a massive phoenix, making him the most powerful student to ever exist. But before we get into all that, let's rewind and see exactly how he reached this level. An empty battlefield, marked by spears thrust into the ground, symbols of wars long forgotten. An ancient scroll recounts that 4 warriors arose to rid the world of evil. Luna was the first, founder of Nebula, an organization of elven mages guided by power and discipline. Next came Duino, the godsmith, a legendary master who defeated giants with strength and ingenuity. Aaron, known for his unusual ears, remains shrouded in mystery, with few recorded deeds. Finally, Lycinus, king of wisdom, whose story intertwines with ancestral dragons. According to the scroll, these events took place about 5,000 years ago. A flashback reveals a man sleeping under a heavy rain, sprawled on the ground. Around him, several identical bodies lie in a red field after a great celebration. Through a keyhole, a man in armor is seen surrounded by a green aura. Called Kyle, he commands absolute silence. A great dragon rests around him, asking for the heart to be taken and the path to be followed. Covered in mud, the mage insists on trying to save him. The dragon's eyes open, revealing itself as the mysterious voice. The healing fails, and the creature recalls the promise to save the world. With effort, Kyle responds with irony before the dragon rests. Upon touching the heart-shaped crystal, memories of his companions return. A colossal column of water rises against a shapeless entity. Wielding the shining sword, Kyle advances without hesitation. Thus, the hero of the beginning is revealed. The final scream seals Erebus's defeat and the end of the story. We realize that the reader is a woman, who questions someone named Reina for having reread that book so many times. A baby with red hair and eyes appears, named Leo, while the woman comments that she will read it again because he likes the story. She finishes the reading, observes the child's reaction, and realizes that the baby is not just entertained. Still, she resumes reading, while Leo's mind screams for her to stop. The image of victorious Kyle appears, and the baby reflects on the events from 5,000 years ago. Confused, he questions why all memory of his existence has been erased. Much later, on a clear morning, the imposing Delon Royal School stands out. In a classroom, a man on a small podium asks for the students' attention. With enthusiasm, he announces the arrival of the Hour of Heroes, 5,000 years after the original emergence. He explains the changes in the world and the choice of the school as the venue for the entrance exam to Lumière. Proudly, he states that future heroes are among those present. A rumble breaks the mood, revealing Leo sleeping, which irritates the teacher. Called to the front, the young man responds dismissively about the heroic ritual. Another student intervenes with the correct answer, citing sacred rituals. The teacher praises the prodigy Gulliver Trayton, who shows confidence in the exam. Meanwhile, Leo silently reflects on gods, records, and his own forgetfulness. At the end, the room stirs as they observe something outside, except for Leo, isolated at the back. They watch a group of wealthy individuals pass by, commenting that among them is Celia Zerdinger. Through the loudspeakers, the school announces that everyone must proceed to the auditorium to receive visitors, and the protagonist stands up. Gulliver teases, saying that Leo would never catch the Zerdinger's attention. Disinterested, the young man states that he prefers to go home. With disdain, he makes it clear that he does not bow to important surnames. Irritated, Gulliver responds that he just wants to assess Celia as a potential rival. Later, at home, Leo trains exhaustively with a staff, while a training sword rests on the ground. Sweaty, he catches his breath and reflects that at least he does not neglect his current body. He compares his new form to that of his past life, now more efficient. A voice pulls him from his thoughts. Turning around, an elegant woman with long hair appears, attacking with a sword. The strike is blocked with precision. The distance opens, and she comments that it has been a while since their last duel. The woman states that mediocrity is not enough to enter Lumière. Declaring it the final test, she attacks again. The blows intensify until Leo calls her mother. Revealed as Lady Plov, she advances with excessive force. Barely, the attack is not fatal, but Leo dodges at the last moment. With a perfect counterattack, he disarms her and wins. Impressed, she asks if her son truly wishes to go to Lumière. Leo concludes that perhaps there are records of his past life there. The mother reveals that the Zerdinger family will be staying with them, leaving the boy surprised. Then the woman states that she does not care, as she can ask the leader of the Zerdingers for Leo to inherit the family's combat technique. Petting her son's head, she assures him that this will prepare him to enter Lumerne. Confident, the young man decides that he will attempt admission this very year. Sometime later, in front of an imposing mansion, a retinue awaits the arrival of a carriage. The black vehicle parks, and a presence shows discomfort with the location. An elegant heel touches the ground, announcing Celia Zerdinger. Well-dressed, she questions why they didn't stay at a hotel. With luggage beside her, she shows disdain for the environment and focuses solely on Lumerne's examination. Gis Zerdinger appears and mentions Leo, receiving immediate disdain. Celia asserts that someone without an aura is insignificant. Later, in a luxurious hall, Gis greets the Plavs with reverence. Lady Plav and Dade formally welcome them. The young woman introduces herself coldly, confirming she will be staying there. Upon seeing Reina, Celia finds the physical resemblance strange. Gis reveals that the woman is his aunt. As bags are taken away, a narration recalls the visit to Delan School. During tea, it is mentioned that Leo left the event to train. Reina downplays the incident and praises the Zerdinger name. Meanwhile, Leo and Celia train with swords. Reina praises her son's talent, confident in his abilities. Intrigued, Gis decides to evaluate the boy personally. In the duel, Leo attacks with confidence. Sitting after training, the young man concentrates a faint blue aura in his hand, revealing absolute determination. Suddenly, the boy looks at his own glowing hand and says it finally worked. He thinks of a doll and explains that he had never mastered this energy because he knew that, at any moment, he could specialize in it. He realizes that this choice would end his chance to accumulate magical and spiritual power, making him remember the fallen friends and that if he had discovered this earlier, he could have saved them. As someone approaches the location, the boy mentally promises that, in this life, he will perfectly master the aura. Someone calls the boy, asking if he is Leo, and he turns to see who it is, only to find a skinny girl standing with her hands on her hips. Smiling confidently, Celia says he seems to have at least some understanding and that she should give him a lesson, thinking of gaining favor with her aunt. The protagonist asks who this girl is that just showed up. She introduces herself arrogantly, making her disdain clear in her tone. Even prouder, the girl claims to be recognized as the Lady of the Sword by the people. Standing up, the boy thanks her for the offer but says he has no desire to be trained by someone less skilled than himself. Annoyed, she says she didn't quite understand what he meant. Calmly, he explains that in a life-and-death battle, she would probably win because he doesn't use aura. Confidently, Leo adds that if it were just skill with the sword, the outcome would be different. The girl's gaze ignites with rage. Looking back, she notices various different weapons. Celia then draws a sword from the arsenal and tells him that if he is so sure they should duel. Very haughty, she thinks he has no chance against her. The girl then bets him that if she wins, he will be her servant for a week, to which he smiles and asks what he gets if he wins. The knight points her sword firmly at him. With a sly smile, she replies that she will then be his servant. The protagonist then uses his hand to grab his training sword. Lifting the weapon towards her, he asks if they should start right away. Immediately charging at her, he delivers an attack that the girl defends with some success. Positioning herself, the girl thinks his speed is quite impressive. Charging at him this time, she thinks he won't win just with speed. With a keen gaze, the boy prepares for another attack. We then see him bringing the blade down on the girl once more, and she blocks with some difficulty while questioning what kind of giant strength this skinny boy has. Surprisingly, she jumps back to escape, and the boy's attack breaks the ground. Without wasting time, he advances against her before she can land from the jump. Nervous, the brunette knows she can't defend against that strike. We see him hit his sword exactly where he intended, right beside the girl's face, who barely managed to swing her own weapon. Leo then asks why she used an aura shield if this was supposed to be a duel of pure sword skill. Very enraged, the girl is surrounded by a red defensive aura and explains that it is a survival instinct. It wasn't intentional. He says he will win anyway, and she screams asking how that can be, explaining that the difference between those who use aura and those who don't is absurd. The boy starts fiddling with his bracelets. He throws them on the ground, asking if she wants to test those words, and she realizes that the bracelets were magic blockers. He smiles slightly, looking very pleased with himself. The protagonist takes a quick leap forward. His sword strikes Celia's red aura shield with force and shatters it. Completely shocked, she can't believe what's happening. Totally focused, he wonders how there can be such foolish people. Elsewhere, in the mansion gardens, Gis and Reina walk side by side while chatting casually. The woman then sees her son passing by and calls out to him. Gesturing to point at the man beside her, she tells the little one to greet their guest. Bowing forward in respect, he introduces himself as Leo Plov to the adult. And the adult soap opera star introduces himself as Gis Zerdinger, saying he must already know they are relatives. Shaking his nephew's hand, the elder says it's a pleasure to meet him. The woman then asks the protagonist if he has happened to meet Celia. Looking over his shoulder, he says she is being taken care of, and we see the dear girl being carried on a stretcher by 2 knights. We see the girl completely out of sorts on the stretcher, and someone very worried calling out for her. Gis then asks one of the knights what happened to leave her that way. Focusing his gaze on the white-haired boy while the knight explains what happened, Zerdinger wonders how he could have defeated Celia without even mastering the aura. Approaching the little one, the uncle says it's impressive that he defeated the girl, to which he replies that the victory was only possible because she underestimated him. When asked what the agreement was between them when they dueled, the boy replies that they agreed the loser would be a servant to the winner. The adult chuckles lightly when he realizes the girl will be his nephew's servant for a week. More seriously, the man explains that although agreements are important, the girl is still a Zerdinger. In a frightening tone, the man looks at his nephew and says that for that reason, she cannot do the work of a servant. Extending his hand to him, Gis says he hopes he reconsiders that agreement and mentions he can offer something else in return. Before the man can say what it is, he is surprised to hear Leo saying he refuses to reconsider the bet. Not backing down, the little one explains that the bet was made between them and that the girl should honor her own family's name. Trying to negotiate, the man asks if even learning the Zerdinger family technique would change his decision. Smirking cheekily, the boy replies that he doesn't think it's a technique worth learning if it's only offered to save the girl from hard work. Returning to a threatening vibe, the man asks if he just heard that he would treat a Zerdinger as a servant and if he called the technique worthless. Straightforward and with his very funny smile, the brat replies that yes, he heard correctly. The adult asks if he doesn't think that speaking that way is a bit crazy, and the boy says he has no intention of insulting the rich. Putting a hand over his chest, he adds that he would gladly accept the technique as a reward for defeating Celia, had it been offered that way. While some knights talk among themselves that the girl has woken up, we hear the young man explain that the technique was only offered to cover up her failure. With a close-up of his playful face, he continues saying that this means the elder thinks that if she hadn't let her guard down, she would have won. Reina listens to everything with a proud smile, and the young man says that even if Celia had taken the duel seriously, he would still have beaten her. Smiling with excitement, the man found it very bold of Leo to refuse the offer because of that. Calling the guards closer, he thinks about how much he wanted the boy's surname to be Zerdinger. Gis asks the guards to take his niece to the maid's quarters, and the boys are left confused. Uncle and nephew stand face to face, with no tension between them, and the man calls the boy by name, asking what the elder desires. The man then says the boy can feel at ease with him. Putting one hand on the boy's shoulder, he says he can even call him uncle quietly, and the boy takes the opportunity to call him uncle right away. Some time passes, and we can see that night is falling as Gis watches his nephew leaving through the courtyard. Lady Plov is surprised by her brother asking again if she wants him to teach the family technique to her son. Striking a pose worthy of a magazine cover, he says he will try hard to convince their brother to allow Leo to learn the Phoenix breath technique. The next day, in the morning, we see sunlight streaming through the windows of one of the rooms. With an embarrassed look, we see Celia introducing herself. Fully dressed as a maid from head to toe, she says she will be Master Leo's servant for a week. Reading his little Percy Jackson book, the boy is in a good mood, seeing the girl in those outfits that he says suit her very well. He adds that the simple clothing combined with the girl's elegance makes her very pretty. Stressed, Zerdinger intervenes, saying that she knows she's cute, but he needs to stop drooling, and he responds mockingly that he didn't mean to offend. Remembering the past, he reveals that he once had a friend who was very fond of beauties and that he must have unconsciously picked up a bit of that for himself. Thinking of a stained glass window in a Gothic church, the protagonist concludes that eternal beauty is always the best. We have a vision of Duino surrounded by animals and nature, and he said that when peace arrived, he would dedicate himself to sharing beauty with others. Celia thinks it's cute that he had a friend who admired beauty, but then the dear boy says there was a downside because he was very clueless. We then see a flashback of the girl heroines from the past, Luna and Lycinas. We have a very nervous Duino asking them for something in the name of eternal beauty, and then we see the group of 5 heroes gathered while he begs them to be his models for a drawing, which they apparently would rather starve than do. Kyle and Aaron watch the girls beating up the daring blacksmith. Back in the present, we have a very curious Celia about the book our protagonist is reading, and then she asks him about it. Picking up the book and lifting it from the table, the boy smiles and asks if she means that one, and that it's just something he read a lot when he was younger. She doesn't understand if he's really reading a children's book, but what a weird little boy with a Peter Pan complex. Murmuring, the temporary maid seems quite disappointed. Walking around the room, she catches the boy's attention with her silence. Approaching Leo's bookshelf, the girl points out that he seems to admire the hero from the beginning a lot. Analyzing the books, she says it's rare to find someone who knows as much as he does, and that she herself has collected many books about them throughout her life. Raising her arms to reach one of the books, she says there's something that caught her attention. Using her fingers to highlight one of the books from the others, she points out that there's an absurd amount of books about Kyle. Leo then explains that among all the achievements of the ancient heroes, many have no recorded origin. With a cozy smile, he states that he believes many of those came precisely from Kyle. Totally shocked, she says he was just a liar who came after the heroes and wanted to steal their glory. Turning his head to her like breaking the fourth wall in Modern Family, he asks her what she said. Returning the book to the shelf, she justifies herself by saying that it's what most people think, and she agrees. Getting up from the chair, the boy asks if they will start training after breakfast, and Celia is completely caught off guard by the question. Wanting to discover the secret of his strength, she says she will definitely join the training. Mockingly, he turns and starts walking, saying it might be too much for her to keep up, and she shouts that she is a Zerdinger. Sometime later, we see the girl collapsed in pain in the training room, all sweaty and out of breath from the beating she took. Standing a few steps away from her, he explains that when she runs out of energy, her movements become pretty mediocre, and then she creates openings to be attacked. Totally out of breath, Celia asks if he really considers physical exhaustion as training. Too cocky, the protagonist says that kids of this generation are very weak and thinks that modern classroom control techniques have sidelined physical training. Struggling to get up with great difficulty and exhaustion, she dares him to repeat that she is weak if he has the courage, not even paying attention to the girl's angry barks. He thinks about how physical training also reinforces the aura. She falters as she stands completely upright and points her sword at him. The Zerdinger shouts for him not to underestimate her. Charging towards him, she calls him a copy of Killua from Hunter x Hunter. With a single swing of his sword, he deflects the girl's charge and sends her flying backward. She crashes onto the ground, throwing her sword away. Sitting down in a fury, she screams, asking why she never wins, and the boy stops in front of her and asks if it has been enough. Handing her a bracelet just like the one he wears, he hears her thank him in return. When Leo drops the bracelet in her hands, she falls to the ground with all her strength as he reveals that little thing is enchanted with weight magic. Such a playful boy, he tells the girl to start using that in her training from the next day. Later, outside the mansion, we see leaves flying and the sun illuminating the space. Celia is completely worn out, poor thing, and she gasps for someone to stop walking immediately, and behind her, we have Gis just watching near a tree. Thoughtful, he ponders how that experience could be great for the girl, for her to learn more about controlling pride before going to Lumerne. The man then calls his nephew loudly, who was the one the girl wanted to stop, but she is kneeling and too weak for that. The boy promptly goes to the adult, calling him uncle. He then explains to the younger one that he is planning to ask the big boss patriarch of the family for permission to teach the family technique to him. Leo seems not to fully understand what is happening. Zerdinger then explains that the phoenix's breath is the origin of the family's aura control, and that only those recognized by them can learn that wonder. Regaining a bit of strength, the girl says that no way her father will allow such madness, and that's when he tells the kids that he has the trick up his sleeve because there's a condition for that. And then Gis tells them that the condition is for our protagonist to pass the Lumerne test that year, and the girl nearly faints thinking it's not easy. She adds that it could even be dangerous for the young man since he doesn't even control aura. Hiding the game, he also says he doesn't have practical experience in this life, but he can remember his past life wielding a sword and aura. The uncle then asks what he thinks, to which Leo replies that his parents said they would respect the decision he made, and smiling with a bit of pride and confidence, he confirms that he will take the test. The uncle smiles with some joy, and confirms the suspicions that he already intended to take the test that very year. Taking the lead in a race, the protagonist says they need to get back to training after resting, and the girl runs after him saying she won't fall behind. A week later, on the day of the test, we see an open courtyard full of uniformed students and only Celia among them in a different outfit. Leo and she walk through the courtyard together, while people whisper about the girl and ask who he is, and the brunette asks her cousin if he is okay, and he says, uh-huh. Mischievous, he tells her she should stop calling him master, and she realizes it's true. Someone arrives in the courtyard and calls Celia by name and title, and the two look at the previously unknown person. We then see it's Gulliver, who is shocked to see her accompanied by Leo. He is torn between insulting the boy as a non-aura user and flattering the girl with great politeness. The two don't even respond to the snob. Embarrassed, he then introduces himself to the brunette with his full name and says they met when she visited the Dalan school. The redhead claims to be the school's genius master, but she interrupts the boar saying she really can't remember who he is. The girl then grabs her cousin's hand, and then she pulls him away from the drooling boy, giving him a see you never. Two figures in black cloaks and white hair appear in the courtyard, calling Celia by name, and everyone turns to look. She is too surprised, but Leo can't even pretend to care. Two figures with bluish-white hair are introduced. The taller one is Abad Llewellyn, and the other is Chelsea, his younger sister, and they say they haven't seen the brunette in a long time. Our girl clenches her fists when her cousin asks who the two are, and she says they are the Llewellyn siblings. Somewhat irritated, she explains that they are from a renowned family of heroes from the Rodran Empire. With eyes shining with rage, she says they are competitors in the admission exam and that they cannot lose to the other family, but the boy says he doesn't care about that rivalry. The bluish brothers say they haven't seen the brunette in a long time. She agrees, saying it has indeed been a long time, and they ask who the boy with white hair is that's with her. Pumping up her companion, she says he is Leo from the Plav family, and that he is a marquis from the kingdom of Delrod, but he only thinks about his normal house. There are some tense exchanges of glances between the protagonist and one of the brothers, who comments on him being just a little nobody. Turning his back, Abad says the first place is destined for him, and that Celia can bite her nails in anger if she wants and brush her greasy hair, and the sister agrees. She replies that that's not even an insult, and that she will shave their heads when she wins. A guy in sunglasses appears out of nowhere and says that apparently everything is fine. Everyone looks at him, including our protagonists. We find out that the blonde inspired by Constantine from the cartoons is named Albie Giron, and he is one of the teachers at the place. Annoyed, the brunette says he is known for having the eye of evil, and the white-haired boy says he doesn't even know who the uncle is that's drawing attention. She then says that he is a hero recorded in the books, but the boy doesn't seem to care much, until he looks more closely at the guy she says is a hero of the new era. Leo realizes there is something truly powerful in that left eye behind the sunglasses. Albie then explains how the exam will be. One phase with an individual combat test and another with monster domination, and that they will face both challenges one at a time. Using the palm of his hand, he burns the paper he is reading just by using his magic. Throwing the ashes away, the man reveals he finds those methods very inefficient in front of all the competitors. He then pulls a book from inside his suit and falls silent. Opening the book and being surrounded by a golden aura that resembles flames, he recites a summoning spell based on one of the chapters of the book. A light show envelops the entire courtyard, creating a magical circle around everyone as he calls for the forest of monsters. We see the adult extending one of his hands over the book, very serious. Celia is completely shocked by what is happening there, and he begins to say that he hates wasting time unnecessarily. His golden eyes behind the glasses shine when he says he will do the entire exam all at once, and they can figure it out. Leo is calm as he is enveloped by golden lights. He then remembers a class he had about that spell, and that it did something extraordinary. The spell had the ability to recreate the worlds recorded on the pages, which noble heroes had faced, and that in this way he could inherit the powers of the past. Our boy remembers thinking that this would be great as a training system for heroes. Back in the present, we see the brightness almost blinding the vision of the Plav boy. Some time passes, and now the participants have been transported to the so-called Forest of Monsters inside the book, World of Heroes. Albie's voice echoes throughout the environment, as if he were a god speaking, and says that in front of the crowd is the forest, and that they just need to survive to be approved. Albie continues saying that they can cooperate or eliminate each other with not many rules there, and that they could give up by breaking a ball, and Leo is thinking how everything seems the same there. He takes a quiet step forward. He then remembers how the elves lived there before the demon queen Silatuna corrupted the forest. He is cut off from his thoughts when someone screams that they are scared and seeing something very strange. Immediately, a golden light shines with the little guy saying he wants to go home. Probably the return spell because he broke the little ball. Leo hears one of the extras saying that was a shame, it must have just been an illusion and the person already tucked their tail between their legs. Looking around, seeing the environment, he thinks the boy is wrong because that world is not just an illusion without dangers. Everything that happens there is real. As he thinks they face lethal dangers there, something catches his attention in surprise and makes his eyes widen that much. Just in time he jumps back and dodges a green magical arrow that hit the ground where he had just been standing. Silence takes over the place and he looks around attentively. A person steps into the field and comes out of anonymity, asking our protagonist if they hadn't bumped into each other before. Chelsea presents herself, very well dressed, and says she is quite happy to be able to defeat a relative of the Zerdinger. He calmly protests that he is not even part of that family and that he is a Plav. carrying her greenish magic in one hand while the wind swirls around her. The girl says he doesn't fool her because he was with Celia not long ago. In the next second, Abad's sister conjures a huge scythe with her magic. Thoughtful, and not at all worried, the white-haired boy reflects on how this spell didn't exist in the past. Taking a sword to the scythe fight, he thinks about the basic concepts of that magic. Smiling proudly, the girl lets out a slight giggle. She acknowledges that he seems very calm for someone standing in front of her in that situation. Chelsea then makes a spinning motion with her spear as if she were about to take off like a helicopter and fly to Elsa's castle. She then launches a spinning attack towards our protagonist. Not wasting much of his time, the dear boy simply uses a movement of his sword to negate any effect of the attack. The wind spear struck the ground with great force beside the boy. Somewhat surprised, Llewellyn thinks he must be really strong to block that attack without using aura, unless he has some trick up his sleeve. Totally indifferent to her, Leo says the attack was completely weak and offers help to the poor girl. Looking at her with pity, he also didn't expect the girl to mock him when he said she needed a swordsman to survive and gain points. Confident, the girl warns him that she is actually a brawler mage, ready to fight for real. Summoning another weapon, this time a staff, she asks what he called the previous attack, if it was weak. Without even apologizing, he repeats and adds that it was a mega basic attack for a spell based on wind. The dear girl is flabbergasted by his ultra-misogynistic attitude, explaining magic to a mage from the most prestigious family in magic. Overcome with anger, the girl launches a multiple helicopter attack spinning towards the protagonist. When she realizes he has already vanished from where she was aiming, which didn't make much sense, and then she notices how deep this hole she got herself into is, because there's no way to feel Leo's mana anywhere. In the blink of an eye, he is in front of her preparing to land a punch, and all she can think is, how is this even happening? The girl is in total shock, unable to speak. The scythe flies and spins through the air, along with some birds making cawing sounds. Chelsea falls to her knees in front of him, groaning in pain. Still with clenched fists, the protagonist is triggered by the Maria de Panha law, but asks if he can politely request that they be allies. Far away in the dimension outside the book, we have some benches full of people watching the trial, happy that there is finally some movement. A beam of light shines on the holographic screen, and we return to inside the book. The mage is tied to a stake and completely unconscious. Leo is lighting a small fire nearby. We see him smiling mischievously and in a very strange way. In the middle of a forest at night, we see a boy sitting in front of a campfire and a girl tied to a post. There are many trees, and the moonlight casts various shadows around the place. The Llewellyn family mage opens her gray eyes, confused. Frightened to be tied up in front of the flames, she asks what is happening. Leo asks if she will cooperate with him or not, and she gets a bit nervous at the question. She becomes very irritated and says she would never do that, not even by decree. With wide eyes, she also asserts that she doesn't need anyone besides her brother and begins to cast a spell. A magic circle appears around her wrist, which seems to be something very wrong. Holding the rope that binds her, he explains that he has performed a magic seal, and inside, the boy reflects on how his power is almost depleted. He won't last much longer. Chelsea, frustrated, says that won't hold her power for long and that she will soon break free. With a sarcastic smile and still holding the rope, he asks if she really thinks he will let her concentrate enough for that. Leo then makes the flames rise around the girl, who completely loses her mind and desperately begs him to stop because she doesn't want a tan. As the high flames begin to burn the girl's dress, which must be more expensive than the rent of the one who runs this channel. Looking at her from down there, he suggests that she cooperate, and then she gives in, but he asks her to swear in the name of her family, and she says yes. Let's go already, my friend. She screams that she swears in the name of Llewellyn that she will cooperate, and begs the boy to stop trying to make witch barbecue. The protagonist loosens the rope he was holding while thinking it was a piece of cake to convince the darling because she is just a child. The ropes that held the girl to the post quickly come undone and she plummets from high above. Once again we see her gray eyes at the same moment he says he is quite eager to work with her. We realize he caught her in his arms so she wouldn't fall to the ground like a sack of potatoes and calls Chelsea the big Llewellyn witch. We see a large chandelier in a spacious and very elegant area. In a wide hall, some seated people watch a projection of two competitors participating in the trial, one on the ground unconscious, and the other standing beside him. Thanks to another angle, the projection of the man comes into focus, and we see more clearly the people watching, and Albie is obviously there. Some random extra with a sword and another extra with a magic scepter are fighting. Meanwhile, the professor thinks how these fighting people are flops. The powerful-eyed professor thinks to himself that choosing to fight instead of survive is being very foolish, and admits that only 2 students seem to understand the trial. Two people appear in front of a giant puzzle, one producing magic to levitate the pieces and the other holding a sword and just watching, Celia Zerdinger and Abad Llewellyn. Albie thinks about how the future of the Empire will apparently shine a lot with them, but soon we see him confused at the sight of a giant fighting a sorceress. Leo Plav fights alongside the sorceress, and this catches the blonde's attention, and he realizes that his behavior earlier was strange, but that getting Chelsea to cooperate was something exceptional. We return to see the projection in the large room, and the professor in focus, and the professor thinks that even if he lacks strength. As the giant is attacked by a spell, the blonde thinks he is like a super mega lucky underdog. A blow suddenly defeats the giant. In the forest, as the creature falls after taking a hit, Chelsea comments on how it's actually decent to be accompanied by a knight. She asks what the nature of the aura Leo is using is since she hasn't felt any kind of magic coming from him all this time, and Leo replies that he doesn't know how to use aura. She asks how the big guy manages to do everything he has done without using aura, to which he responds that being smart is much more interesting and important than having strength. The protagonist continues saying that it's exactly the same as the wind magic she is trying to use, and asks what she thinks is the true essence of that magic. Chelsea's eyes shine and a moon appears in them. She casts a very large and brightly lit spell. There is a defeated being in the forest resembling that little creature from The Lord of the Rings, whose name I forgot, and that says my precious. The sorceress points out that she thinks it's very cheeky of him to want to give a lecture to a Llewellyn about wind magic. He replies that the girl's power is certainly quite impressive, but that's not how wind magic should be used, especially since it can be cooler. Chelsea starts to protest because she is actually very cool, but the boy suddenly stops walking. Leo extends his hand and tells her to stop and wait. He steps over a weed or whatever it is, but there's something strange on the ground. The Llewellyn says that the doll on the ground looks like a mummy forgotten since Halloween, and Plav responds that he has never seen a party decorated like that before. A thought occurs to him saying that now he understands the condition to pass the exam, but he doesn't tell us because his eyes widen first. A red lightning bolt strikes the place where they were. The boy jumps away, protecting Chelsea from the imminent threat. Two figures appear, and one of them says it was a shame they didn't hit her squarely. Taking a few steps forward, the unknown continues saying that if they took care of the girl, it would be too easy to take the swordsman out of the game. We realize that one of the people is Gulliver, who smiles triumphantly, saying they should attack the two together. The other guy with the axe starts to move, advancing towards the duo, shouting. Leo's illuminated red eye bulges. With a single blow, he repels the attack and slaps the extra in the face. We realize that Gulliver was accompanied by more than one person. He is with a group, and everyone is somewhat shocked by the guy's defeat. Chelsea hears her partner asking her to help him in the battle, and she immediately agrees. The two prepare to fight side by side, she with her wind scythe and he with his little sword, and the opponents shout that they will attack them. We see the protagonist with a sparkle in his eyes. Gulliver runs anxiously alone through the trees. From another angle, we see the path he runs on while thinking to himself that he will not be defeated there. Very tense and scared while fleeing, the redhead thinks he will be fine if he finds another group to join. We notice that nearby is our protagonist, who sees him running when she looks back and briefly recognizes him, telling Abad that they should see what happened. They then arrive at the clearing where Chelsea and Leo are standing, with some Halloween costumes scattered on the ground and a few participants sleeping as well. Very happy, the youngest smiles and calls for her older brother who has just arrived. As the big guy with bluish hair runs to his dear sister and hugs her, lifting her into the air, Celia walks over to her cousin and asks how they ended up as a duo. Fixing his hair and being quite evasive, he says it was just a matter of asking nicely, but the brunette replies that not even with Jesus coming down to earth would the girl easily accept a truce. Smiling mischievously, he reveals that all it took was for him to throw a friendly and well-seasoned barbecue, and she asks if it was a barbecue of pale fools. Not paying much attention to her, our protagonist starts helping one of the fallen people to get back on their feet. Not understanding a thing, Chelsea asks him why he is helping those little ones over there. As other participants begin to get up, some even helping each other, he responds that there's no reason not to help, and that they will all conquer the world together. The boy with black hair raises his eyebrows, somewhat confused when the sorceress asks what he is talking about conquering the world. He then explains so that the other duo also understands that there's something fishy going on, that something didn't smell right in that dump. He then asks if they can feel something strange about the defeated enemies, and steps on one just for it to break easily, saying they were drained. The protagonist explains that this isn't the only strange thing about the situation, and asks if they don't feel that there are very few monsters in a place called the Monster Forest. Surprised by her cousin's question, Celia lets out a catapimbus. Following the reasoning, he says that a stronger monster must have appeared to scare the others, and Abad says that this is the test, to stop this stronger creature. Before he can respond, Leo is startled by a loud grunt. Everyone looks in the direction of the threatening noise that makes the whole forest tremble. The quartet stands still, all with wide eyes, except for the boy Plov because he knows he has the power of protagonism on his side. Elsewhere, Gulliver is scared and alone with a scepter that looks more like an absurdly sized lantern. Speaking to no one, the boy promises that he will be the one to take care of our boy without an aura. On the ground in front of him, a strange thing appears and catches his attention. Falling to the ground, he panics, wanting to know what kind of nonsense that was. The scepter in his hand seemingly begins to be covered with a slimy material. Suddenly, the same disgusting and viscous material paints his head. Looking very slowly, and without moving a muscle, while that filth drips down his face, he comes face to face with something terrible. Right above him, a kind of gigantic spider with sharp teeth appears. And it is nothing like the little spider that climbed up the wall. And even if it were, there was no rain there. The testing area is well lit and quiet that morning. Inside the monitoring room, we have several people, both instructors and participants, who failed, and Albie is watching the quartet on a huge holographic screen. One of the failures says he managed to defeat about 15 in the test, and another loser like him says he did roughly the same amount. From a distance, the man administering the test observes them and says that about 500 candidates have already been eliminated. An extra approaches him saying that they need to approve at least 100 candidates, and that there are only about 50 still participating in the test. Adjusting his stylish sunglasses, the blonde emphasizes that he has standards for approving people, and if none of them are at least decent, then no one will pass. As he watches Leo on the screen and thinks that a true hero only reveals themselves in the midst of difficulties, he says that the director knew this when he asked him to administer the test. With his attentive golden eyes, the instructor notices that the boy has perceived something strange in the forest. As the boy helps a dazed competitor, the observer wonders if he will be able to overcome the challenge. The group still participating in the test runs toward the noise, led by Leo, who is closely followed by his cousin Celia and the Llewellyn brothers. A random boy with a ponytail comments to another stranger that everything is very dark around there. Our girl with black hair lights up a red light at the tip of her sword and says, "There's something just ahead," while Chelsea is right behind her with her scepter at the ready. She points her glowing sword forward. We then see the strange mutant spider with sharp teeth from a few moments ago, and Gulliver is very scared, with half of his body inside the creature's mouth. Girl Zerdinger is in shock next to Abad and asks what the hell that is they are seeing. And the boy says that the monster's abdomen is the main part. Raising his own scepter and channeling his greenish wind aura into a targeted attack at the lower part of the giant creature, someone interrupts him. Putting an arm in front of him and catching the elder's attention, Leo directs his speech to the spider appetizer, advising Gulliver to break the orb and give up. Trying to stay comfortable between the teeth of the enormous arachnid, the redhead recognizes his rival's voice. We then see the boy breaking his orb of surrender with his hand. A beam of light fills the area, and golden flames burst from the spider's mouth where the magical genius of Delan once was. Chelsea's older brother charges his wind magic once again at the tip of his scepter with a giant stone, looking quite calm. Calling out the name of the spell, Wind Whistle, the wizard releases his attack toward the monster, just as Gulliver is out of there. We see that the attack had an effect and injured the monster, but someone points out that this alone wouldn't be enough to win the fight. The four are covered by the shadow of the monster, and everyone looks quite insecure with nervous faces, except for the reincarnation of Kyle, who has no expression at all. The 8-legged creature with several sharp teeth is named Spider Queen, Talatunia, and she leaps, hovering above everyone. Finding her mid-air, a beloved extra with a big axe also jumps and prepares to land a direct hit on the monster. But before he can do that, who takes a slap and flies away over Abad's sister is none other than himself. As he falls like a sack of potatoes to the ground, Celia prepares and says she will finish off that ugly thing in one blow. At the tip of her sword, she concentrates her red energy into a sphere that releases rays, and she names the technique Prominence. In a single shot, she launches a beam almost like a laser against the creature, making a beautiful full moon design on it, in high relief. Letting out a little scream of pain, we see that the arachnid is not very happy with this tattoo. With wide eyes looking up, our protagonist says she can't believe her strike didn't have the expected effect. Levitating and surrounding herself with her magical energy, Abad tells our girl that the destructive power of a knight and a wizard is like a whole world apart. Overly confident, he is smiling at the moment he channels his magic into an attack named Raphael. No joke, the name of the attack is Raphael. Creating a whirlwind of green magic above his scepter, everyone sees the blue-haired man positioning himself to unleash his attack. Some even run away. The Raphael is thrown against Talatunia, and it's almost a Rasen shuriken from Naruto, hitting the enemy multiple times. With the silver light of the moon as a witness, our cool wizard is levitating and watching the monster closely, waiting to know the result of the attack. Suddenly, he is surprised by something that catches his attention coming from above. We then see our 8-armed queen jumping furiously above him in a surprise ambush. Frightened and worried about her brother, Chelsea screams for him and unleashes one of her wind attacks. But it's too late, and young Llewellyn is hit in one of his arms by the monster, getting scratched and also tearing his fancy shirt. Running to her brother, the mage asks if he is okay, and he thanks her for the help. The dear one with the ponytail, whose name no one knows, is against a tree and asks what kind of creature they are facing. The siblings and Celia are completely shaken by the fact that their attacks are having no effect, and the nameless extra screams about how the spider's recovery is somewhat of a seal. The arachnid lets out a threatening scream and charges at the group once again. Leo, who had been very quiet for a while to everyone's surprise, says that she is from Erebus's army that once destroyed the forest, and that she is the queen of Tartarus and daughter of Silatuna. The other three freeze upon hearing the name Tartarus, looking at him with great fear. Thoughtful, the boy considers how the ability of the instructor of that exam in his left eye must come from the Fairy King for him to do all that. In a flashback, we see Talatunia chasing elves in the past and discover that she devoured the Fairy King's right hand in addition to destroying all 11 lands. But we also find out that Luna definitely finished off the Queen of the Monster Forest 5,000 years ago. The protagonist deduces that perhaps the king's hand in that disgusting creature's stomach saved her from being completely wiped out. This is due to the eternal healing magic that the king's ring, the Ring of Life, provided, and which was snatched by Talatunia. After the explanation, Abad points his scepter at the monster again and says that defeating it is the key to passing the test, so he will defeat it, and Celia says not even in a dream. The two then use their magic to target the detestable Spider Queen in a Christmas light show. Look how ugly she gets taking magic to the face. Take that, you hellish tarantula. Leo explains again to the pretty dumb ones that attacking is pointless, that the creature will just keep regenerating without any problem, and that they will end up running out of magic. We see the creature regenerating and writhing in the process. Worried, the brunette asks her cousin what his suggestion is, what he thinks they should do to pass that test, and he replies that Abad and she should cooperate. The older one says he would rather count grains of sand in the Lensois Marinenses than fight side by side with Zerdinger, and she says the same thing. Calmly, the boy with white hair says he will explain again, or he will have to draw for them, but that this is the only way not to be failed. The two proud ones shut their mouths and remain paralyzed for a while, thoughtful. Llewellyn says that even if they agree to be allies, it would take time to conjure a strong enough attack to take down the spider all at once, without healing, and the brunette asks who will distract the creature while they are channeling energy. Chelsea watches our protagonist as he thinks about what to do. Shocking a total of 0 people, he says that he himself will hold the creature for as long as necessary. The black-haired swordswoman shouts at him that this is madness, and that without aura he will be doomed, but the confident boy says he can hold it for 5 minutes. Startled, the boy with bluish hair and white eyes asks what happens if they don't have a strong attack in 5 minutes. Leo looks at him over one shoulder, with a small but sincere smile. He then bends down to pick up an axe that was on the ground after its owner was knocked out and was taking a nap, and says he believes in his companions. Very hermit-like and wise with his 15 years of life in this life, the boy says that fire and wind always become stronger together, and that they are complementary. Abad and Celia look at each other, somewhat unsure of what to do with his information that seems to have been taken from Avatar, The Last Airbender, or from a physics book. As a reminder that they were still in danger, our least favorite venomous monster screams with its sharp teeth and drool dripping toward the boy Plav. With a silly and nostalgic smile on his face, he stares at the queen and says that it reminds him of good memories. Our boy then readies his axe and prepares to face the ugly monster that is already gearing up for him like a spitting spider. With a short-range strike, he attacks his longtime opponent without thinking twice as he makes a wide cut, and then he says that it has been a while since they last saw each other. This leaves the fire and wind duo completely surprised, because the little one's strength is indeed very great. With one more blow, this time he delivers a solid punch to the creature's chin from below, eliciting a loud scream from it. Very confident, he says he missed the demon from Tartarus. In the past, we heard a loud scream in the dark forest and saw a small blonde elf running between the trees with spider webs. Startled, he doesn't even see where he's going and ends up crashing into one of the thick webs that was in his path. We see a silhouette watching the little one as he struggles, cries, and calls for help. He then notices that the silhouette is none other than Talatunia, screaming and charging at him with her wide-open mouth, and then he whispers for help. Closing his eyes and waiting to become spider food, the unknown thinks only of his mother. He then opens his eyes when he hears someone telling the ugly creature to back off, and then he notices a light filling the area. He realizes that there is a woman against the light, holding a magical staff, and it seems she has come to his rescue. Very calmly, the stranger questions how that monster has the audacity to disturb the neighborhood with that ugly face, and even eat the king's hand. She then aims a concentration of golden aura at the eight-legged queen, who runs away in panic. We see the magic concentrating more and more at the tip of the staff, like a weapon being charged. The forest then trembles, and a large column of golden light rises among the trees with the explosion caused by the attack. The dust is high, but someone arrives saying that it seems the influence of Erebus has reached even here, in this backwater. Approaching the elf boy trapped in the spider web, we see another unknown person, but not the woman from before. The man with white hair and a confident smile asks the boy if he is okay. Back in the present, we see Leo very serious, staring at something in front of him. He then furrows his brow and raises his axe again, thinking it was a good test to see his powers without aura. Then he calls for his ally Chelsea, who is nearby, very paralyzed and holding her cute little magic staff. The protagonist then asks her to use her wind magic to launch all the fallen weapons on the ground to him. Quickly and without getting distracted, he jumps to the side and dodges one of the creature's piercing legs. The girl protests, saying that if she does that, she will end up making a mixed salad out of the boy because he will be sliced trying to grab the weapons. He tells her to cooperate and do what he's asking. There's no time for discussion, sister. He will find a way to get the weapons. Focusing her green wind energy at the top of her staff, the mage asks which weapon he wants. At that moment, his big axe is shattered by an attack, and he screams for her to throw him anything for the love of God. We then see the dear girl ready to send one of the weapons to him. He tries to recognize what will come his way by the sound, which doesn't make sense, but who am I to judge the protagonist's skills? Jumping high and dodging another charge from the beast, he thinks that it seems like it will be a scimitar and a small sword that the girl will send him. Catching the weapons mid-air, one in each hand, without even bothering to look, our boy shows why he is the protagonist. Looking bravely at the enemy, he tells her that it's time to break some bones. Very quickly, so fast that he seems to have made shadow clones, our boy delivers several blows one after the other. The sword then breaks because apparently there are only weapons of questionable quality in this story, and he then asks for more weapons to be sent to him. Crossing his hands and then using his magic again, we see Abad's sister very attentive to the fight to be a good support. We see that she throws him a dagger, an arrow, and another axe. Leo then throws the arrow at the monster and grabs the other two weapons in both hands. As he brings the axe down on the creature, the girl thinks that even though he seems to be about their age, at that moment he looked like something else. As the boy takes a breath, looking at the sky, the girl thinks he looks like a war god, like Kratos himself. Nearby, we can see Celia very attentive to what is happening, and right behind her, we see Abad, who is shocked because the boy was not just any lowlife. We see that there is a small cut leaking red juice around. We then see that it is from Leo's cheek that the liquid drips, and he has shining eyes and a smile while thinking that it had been a while since someone had hit him. Holding a weapon with both hands, he thinks that if he can't defeat a simple insect, those who have already passed will laugh at him from beyond. Chelsea tells him that was the last weapon around, and she seems quite worried. The boy also gets nervous right away and asks her how there wasn't even a butter knife around. At that moment, Celia shouts her cousin's name and tells him to run to the hills because she is ready and surrounded by her blazing red energy. Shooting a column of fire from the tip of her sword, which is amplified by a swirling typhoon, she tells the monster to go take a hike. We can notice a Talatunia in the midst of the dance of embers. She looks so cute, turning into barbecue. The healing ring then falls to the forest floor. The creature must have vomited from nerves with all that fire spinning around. Albie's test, at least from the prologue of the book, has been completed, and we can see the quartet standing in front of the little spider barbecue they just made. How delightful. Sitting on the ground completely exhausted, Celia thanks God that they are finally done. She then looks at her cousin, who is standing, and she thinks about how he really held the creature for exactly 5 minutes. Proud of her relative, the brunette says he did really well, and the other girl shouts in agreement that he was amazing. Totally captivated by the boy, Abad's sister says that our boy looked like a Disney prince, a Viking warrior. He doesn't think much of what he did, and she reaffirms that it was very inspiring and that even being a sorceress, she wanted to improve her combat skills and be his student. Very aware that Leo's training is not for the weak, the fire swordswoman says she really hopes Chelsea gets a taste of his training at least once. We see the boy Plox bending down to pick up the Fairy King's ring from the ground. Holding it between his thumb and index finger, he thinks to himself that the reward was indeed the ring itself. From the magical jewel, golden beams of light emerge and generate a sphere with a tiny fairy inside it, which the boy looks at in surprise. He then recognizes the fairy inside the dome and says it is Prince Silrod, who looks at our protagonist with compassion. Leo asks him if the prince remembers who he is, and is about to say the name of his past life, Kyle. Smiling with great warmth, our fairy king begins to shine more brightly. In a beam of magical light, he dissolves and then returns to the stone of his recovered ring, which is in the hero's hands. He thinks that Albie probably gained his powers as a gift for finding the ancient book of the Fairy King, and then the instructor himself says the test is over. We see Leo face to face with a figure and discover that the reward for completing the test is the Pact of the Fairy King. Surprised by the spiritual encounter, our boy recognizes who the figure is, but we ourselves do not know who it is. Sometime later, we see a big city with many buildings and people walking in the street, and it seems there is someone on top of one of the buildings. A light breeze makes some leaves fly around the place. We realize that the figure on the building is an old man in a cloak with some scars on his face, and he reads a report next to an assistant, saying that the exams in the West are over. Seeing the bearded man up close, we recognize him as Kalian Baden, known as the Holy Knight and also the director of Lumerne. Stressed, the assistant slaps one hand on her forehead and says that the other regions are still going strong, but that Albie is a madman, and she asks how many students passed. The old man seems very excited as he says that many people passed for Albie, a total of 40, and she thinks that is a miserable number for those approved. Looking on the bright side, the old man tells her not to be so grumpy, and that he himself was expecting nothing more than 10 little people approved. The girl asks who took first place, Celia or Abad, and the old man says it was impossible to determine a top candidate and that there was a new candidate for representative. She is surprised to find out that Albie recommended the candidate and wonders again if it would be the representative, Celia or Abad. The old man says it is the first time he hears the dear name, and that she needs to stop having favorites. What an ugly thing. We return to the exam room of the exam center. Albie observes the crowd cheering and roaring for Celia and Abad. On the holographic screen, our instructor watches the image of Leo sitting calmly. He remains silent, deep in thought about what happened during the exam. The director expresses his eagerness to meet the newcomer because Albie usually doesn't recommend anyone, and specifically mentioned that this Leo Plav was a true hero in the making. In a fancy room, a heavy curtain is drawn open in the morning. Someone steps into a warm bathtub and says there's something truly wonderful about recovering from immense fatigue. We then see our protagonist taking a hot bath in his fancy tub, looking very relaxed. He takes a breath and dives into the water. There, submerged and holding his breath, he recalls the words about the reward for passing being the pact with the Fairy King, and remembers Silrod's ring. He rises and asks what happened during that crazy moment. His curious eyes catch something, and he looks puzzled. We see Reyna, the protagonist's mother, standing with a stern expression looking at him. He becomes startled when she suddenly asks if he knows how she was expelled from the Zerdinger family. She then explains that it happened when she sacrificed the flame of Zerdinger to save a combat partner. With his head down, Leo ponders when she says she never regretted doing that. Not for a second. Smiling, the matriarch congratulates him for passing and tells him to use his talents wisely and justly. Later, in a big city, the sun seems to begin rising behind the buildings, and we see a large ring-shaped structure with an active round portal inside. A person steps firmly on the grass just as a voice loudly announces to the passengers who have landed in the city of Lumeria to check their belongings. We see Leo observing the entire place, and it is indeed very beautiful, and he thinks about how that city is regarded as the center of the world. We then see a grand property, full of windows and appearing to stretch for miles in height and length, and we discover it is the Lumerne Academy. With the protagonist still standing on the grass, someone approaches to talk to him and asks how the boy has been in the past month. The person is revealed to be none other than the handsome Uncle Gis, who congratulates the boy for passing. The adult says that in the last 30 days there have been several meetings in the Zerdinger family, and the boy can surely imagine the reason for that. The white-haired boy then asks if any decision was made regarding the succession of the Phoenix Breath technique. Very sweetly, the man tells him that, although his sister, Leo's mother, left the Zerdinger family, he is still her son, and searches for something inside his coat. Handing the boy a large, shiny key, the uncle continues saying that besides that, the heads of the family were impressed with his performance in the exam. Looking at the metallic key with red stone details, the boy hears that its name is the subspace key. Gis tells the boy to use the little thing to open the so-called subspace, and he holds the key, sticks it into the air, and turns it like a little top. And of course, this works. Flames surround the area. A door with a reddish background opens among the boys, and Leo is facing some kind of book that emerges from there. The heat from the flames is intense, and the boy is sweating like Tim Maya, but he tries to read a bit of the book that opens in front of him. There's nothing but blank pages, at least that's what he can see in that absurd brightness. The older man tells him to pour a bit of any liquid onto the book, but he brings his hands to his mouth to think first, biting a finger out of anxiety. He decides to pour a bit of dark chocolate milk onto the book to see if something sweet would come out. The red book shines brightly in the boy's hands as soon as it comes into contact with the liquid. Now we can see some writings in a strange language on the pages that were previously empty, and the Zerdinger says that only the protagonist will be able to read those pages. Placing a hand on one of the boy's shoulders, Gis says that mastering the techniques of that family won't be easy, but he feels the boy will handle it well. He then congratulates Leo for being recognized as part of the Zerdingers as well. Later, in the city center, we see our little Plav wandering alone in front of a building, and there's a girl carrying many stacked books nearby. He wonders if he is really in the place he and Celia had agreed to meet. Suddenly, the girl with the books bumps into him and everything falls to the ground. The boy, the books, and the girl are on the ground after the impact. She has white hair just like his and wears glasses. The stranger is startled, becoming quite nervous about what happened. She quickly starts picking up the books and apologizing for not watching where she was going, but he stays quiet. She hurries off and he notices that something is still on the ground. When he bends down to pick it up, we realize it's an identification document. Leo takes the liberty of reading the information and discovers that she is a new student at Lumerne and her name is Chloe Mueller. A door with a little bell makes noise. Our boy enters the place and someone asks why he is so late. We see that the irritated person is Celia, who is loaded with bags of clothes, and she tells him that they have no time to waste and need to buy the uniforms and new books. She is surprised when he reveals that the reason for his delay was the meeting with Uncle Gis, and she asks how the conversation went. We see a hand conjuring a flame from absolute nothingness. A flaming eye appears, very proud. We see Leo standing in the middle of the store with wings of fire emerging from his back as he looks at the palm of his own hand, and Celia watches him. Dropping all her bags to the ground, she says she can't believe it. He is laughing with triumph and pride, and she thinks about how it took her 3 weeks just to start being able to do something. The girl sits down on the floor, completely shocked by what she sees before her eyes, and she wonders what the hell that boy is. Sometime later, we see waves crashing and a ship docking at a port full of people. Celia and Leo are waiting for someone, and they hear people talking about how big the ship is and other obvious things about ships. A man in a green suit and black shirt approaches and welcomes the newcomers, introducing himself as Professor Ain Elendu from Lumerne, who teaches chivalry. The professor, Knight of the Ice Sea, says they will board for Lumerne soon, and that everyone should get on board. Everyone then sets sail into the lake, with seagulls flying over the ship. On the deck we see a table with fondue, and the professor is leaning back drinking a little glass of grape juice. The sky is clear but with many clouds, and our duo of protagonists is quiet among the other new students of the school. Someone then asks to have a word with the couple, and the Zerdinger heiress nearly faints at the suggestion that she and her cousin would be a couple. A boy with orange hair and sharp teeth appears, smiling, introducing himself as Carl Thomas, an alchemist from the kingdom of Moira. He hands them a business card for his little shop that sells everything, and offers to help them throughout their academic life. Friendly, our protagonist introduces himself by name and says he comes from the kingdom of Delrod, but his cousin stays quiet while the boy recognizes that they came from the west. He says he is impressed with the people who passed that test, but the boy with white hair interrupts, asking if he is the only one who finds all of this very strange. We see many students enjoying the abundant food on the tables on the deck, and the protagonist explains that everything is too peaceful for his taste. Celia says that for the newcomers who managed to achieve being there, it was nothing more than the minimum. But her cousin is more focused on looking at the professor who is watching the horizon. Carl agrees with her, and while eating a little fruit, he says they wouldn't make the students sweat before a ceremony. Suddenly, everyone, except Leo, is surprised by a strange movement of the ship. As a giant tentacle emerges from the lake, the boy responds that yes, apparently they would indeed make them sweat before a ceremony. At that moment, the tentacle strikes the deck right where our new friend, the potion seller, was, and luckily he jumps back to avoid being turned into bits. Screams for help and rescue start to circulate, and the one responsible for the students holds his juice in the glass, mocking the young ones. The professor then brings the glass to his mouth to take a sip. Bordering on sadism, he tells everyone that they are candidates for hero students at Lumerne, and that they need to learn to fend for themselves. A giant octopus with sharp teeth emerges from the waters beside the ship, and our protagonists look at it. Leo steps firmly on the wooden deck and crushes one of the spilled foods. He strikes one of the tentacles before it can hit anyone and tells everyone to stay calm. Celia tells the monster to hold on before unleashing her heat magic through her sword. The creature pauses slightly after receiving the attack. Soon after, a jet of water is shot towards them, and the boy explains to her that everyone knows that krakens react to fire with jets of water. We see that the girl is completely soaked after being hit by such a blast of water. Suddenly, the monster uses one of its tentacles to grab Carl by the foot and lift him into the air, and the protagonists see this and curse the monster as a hellish mollusk squid. The two then hurry and run over the tentacle that invaded the ship, using it as a bridge. The girl uses her sword to weaken the tentacle, holding the boy and release him, while her cousin goes ahead of her, repelling the monster's other attacks. The boy falls onto the deck and is left speechless by what just happened. He then thinks that Celia's power is truly one of the best in the West, but he wonders what absurdity that Leo is. A piece of a frozen tentacle falls right beside him, something that could have seriously injured his dear friend, interrupting his thoughts. Shouting to the person responsible for freezing the mollusk, Carl tells her to be careful because she could have turned him into ground meat, and our protagonist is just there listening. Suddenly, we see that the one taking the creature to a cold place is none other than the girl who knocked over books, Chloe, who is wearing her glasses and aiming blue magic. The protagonist remembers her right away, from when they bumped into each other and she ran off without her identity. Levitating in front of the great sea monster, the girl with the bun launches a kind of freezing ray towards it while the others watch. Jokes aside, the girl was much colder than before, and tells Plav to stay out of the way if he's too weak. Making a side comment, Carl says that strong people don't care about the damage they cause around them when they're fighting. Soon after, another piece of octopus falls onto the deck and startles our orange-haired boy. We realize that the Llewellyn siblings are using their cutting wind powers to make octopus fillets. The two are levitating and trying to handle the situation, and just as Abad tells Celia that the competition between them is far from over, his sister spots Leo. Blushing and smiling, we notice that she seems to have feelings for our protagonist, but he doesn't seem to understand this very well, as is typical of men. Filling his cup a little more, our dear professor reflects on how the lake leading to the academy is full of monsters. On the other side of the ship, calmly observing while the crowd takes a breather, he concludes that a kraken would be a great warm-up. Very attentive, the older man thought to himself that everything was happening exactly as he imagined. The best were standing out. We meet a new character, a dark-haired girl with a bow on her head, named Chen Xia, who has a golden aura and comes from the east. Then he mentions our dear Zerdinger, who comes from the west. He also cites Abad as one of the highlights, and everyone seems to be looking fabulous while fighting. Chloe also appears in the adults' thoughts, and we discover that she comes from the northern lands. A dark-skinned boy with gray hair appears using his green aura on his fists to fight the creature, and Ain refers to him as Warden Titan from the southern lands. Another guy, this time blonde with ice-colored eyes, appears using lightning magic, and we know him as Duran Moira, said to come from the central region. We have an angle where we can see all the previously mentioned fighting against the creature united, and even our forgotten Chelsea is there. And this year's freshmen seem to be top-notch. Calmly, the adult once again raises his juice cup, and then he remembers the only person who wasn't mentioned in that hall, whom he considers to be the one who stood out the most among all, the unknown freshman. We then see a shot of Leo using his sword to cut through the air, and the adult notices that with the quick strikes and mastery of the sword, he seems to anticipate the creature's movements. The professor smiles slightly as he observes the group, and he decides that he will wait to see more of them in his classes. Sometime later, we see that the ship has docked near the Lumerne Academy, and there are several students at the port, feeling unwell and drenched after everything. Carl is completely dizzy and says he didn't think they would run out of their potions so quickly. Totally showy, instead of getting off like a normal person, the professor decides to jump from the ship to the dock and says they should get used to it because that's the way to class. Ain then says they should head to the entrance hall to go through the ceremony immediately, and we see the facade of Lumerne Academy again. From an overhead angle, we see what appears to be an outdoor sports court, also called the Eric Training Area. There is a bleacher that is starting to fill up with some people, and some comment on the freshmen, some good things and some bad. The ceremony is about to start, and the professor gathers the newcomers and tells them to line up by region, with the top students from each in the front. Director Kalian begins to speak at the ceremony, and says he will keep this opening very brief, without much chatter. We see our four main characters from the West standing and listening to the speech. They seem a bit nervous about it all. Chen and Chloe are also attentive, especially when the old man says that if they want to be heroes, they must first believe in themselves. Duran and Warden are also there, with stern faces, when he adds that they must also surpass their own limits every day. With a strong punch on the podium using his greenish energy, the director concludes by saying that those who cannot do that should not be at Lumerne. Everyone watching in the bleachers cheers excitedly, while the newcomers are petrified by the destroyed podium after the punch. Kalyan then asks if he went a bit overboard or was too heavy-handed, and no one finds the joke funny. The audience cheers even louder, and the man is a bit startled by the warm reception to his exaggeration. Some staff members think that the longer they work there, the more they believe that all heroes are a bit off in the head. A master of ceremonies approaches the microphone and says that now they will have a show from the space artist Katy Perry, and shortly after, the speech from the representative of the freshmen. We see that Celia and Abed are completely awestruck when the artist descends from Elon Musk's spaceship singing Dark Horse. Chen and Chloe apparently enjoyed the middle of the show as well, when the beloved was flying held by cables. Duran and Warden are again with stern faces even when the show ends, and then the representative of the freshmen is called, and he is Leo Plov. The protagonist's eyes widen when his name is called on the microphone to give his words. He then notices that the two academy professors he has already met are nearby and looking at him, both Ain and Albie, looking very firmly at each of the instructors, especially the blonde one who administered the admission exam. Our boy wonders if it was he who suggested his name for this nonsense. We then see him walking in his new little shoes over a red carpet, heading towards the stage, stopping in front of everyone, near the spot where Kalyan had broken everything like a strange Barbie. Our hero holds a book with his speech and looks at it. As the boy begins his speech, many of the other figures present whisper among themselves that they have never heard of him, while others say he must be the top of the tops. Duran is near some gossipers and hears what they are saying, but becomes extremely irritated with the whole situation, perhaps out of jealousy. Leo finishes his speech, which no one paid any attention to, and closes the little book. The master of ceremonies then tells him to talk a bit about his aspirations, his dreams, as if it were a Miss Universe contest. Smiling a bit mischievously, we see that there is something brewing in that treacherous little head of his. The boy then hears some staff members saying to each other that everything is going smoothly at the ceremony and that the boy seems very cute and gentle. Throwing everything to the wind, he then looks at his academy colleagues and says that if they have any problem with him being there, they should take him off the top. We see that Abad and Celia are left speechless by this madness he just pulled off. We can also see the souls of Chen and Chloe leaving their eyes at the exact same moment. Warden is still quite angry, but Duran is grinding his teeth in rage at that challenge. Leo is still very confident and adds that that invitation goes to anyone there. Later that same day, the sun is already setting near the Lumerne dormitories, and someone is congratulating the newcomers. The same person then tells them that starting the next day, they will have various assorted classes throughout the week and can attend any of them, regardless of what they want to major in. And after all that, they will be able to choose 3 subjects to specialize in. How wonderful. Leaving the newcomers in their dorms, some seem a bit lost while others just walk to their rooms to rest. A plaque with the number 302 has our protagonist's name engraved on it. Carl then appears, telling our spiky-haired boy that they are neighbors right next to each other. Opening the door to room 303 to enter, our potion seller wishes goodnight to his roommate. Leo then enters his room and flops onto the bed with his suitcase, relaxing on the big bed with his arms crossed behind his head. He closes his eyes, pondering what he actually plans to do in Lumerne, what his goals and dreams are there. We see a door opening, but we don't know where it is, or where it leads. Standing under a starry sky with constellations forming a magical circle, he seems to be in a giant library filled with books, some on the shelves and others flying around. Seeing a smiling, faceless man with white hair, he thinks that his aspiration there is just to find the records of his past life. 2 students are seen carrying their food trays while walking to sit in the school cafeteria. The 2 settle side by side at a table as they prepare to eat, in an elegant environment. The boy with orange hair approaches excitedly, with a large plate of food in hand, and tells him and his roommate to eat together. The boy with white hair is eating calmly with a neutral expression while holding his fork. Without changing his expression, he simply replies that it could be, showing little enthusiasm. A booming voice echoes calling for the freshman representative, which draws everyone's attention in the area. Of course, our boy is not startled by the shout and continues eating his food while someone drops a tray on the table in front of him. Leo, still not the least bit interested in the sudden call, asks who wants to speak, clearly unaware of what it's about. Duran glares at him rigidly, creating a serious and heavy atmosphere, at least on his part. He seems to be filled with a bit of anger or jealousy and asks him what he really meant by that in the speech the day before. The protagonist doesn't even bother to look at his rival and just keeps chewing while deeply thinking about what's happening. Leo concludes that his words in the previous speech were provocative enough to cause a fight, and the hothead talks about being the greatest in the central region. He ironically murmurs that he doesn't understand how he got so affected by a simple speech. The mood shifts as the protagonist and Carl are calm, eating together as if nothing happened, chewing and laughing. We see the irritated blonde grinding his teeth in anger at being ignored. The boy with orange hair looks a bit confused and stops his fork with food near his mouth. The angry one kicks the boys' trays, sending all their food flying. What an absurdity. We see that one of the two who was sitting jumped from the chair he was in. We have some frames showing a hand using a fork to stab various foods that are in the air, like meat, cheese, and salads. We see that the one who jumped, to shock 0 people, was our protagonist, who was in mid-air adjusting his meal and holding the tray. Carl was sitting underneath and holds his own tray to catch what falls. Back on the ground, our boy has his tray in hand with a perfect hamburger on top of it, and the rival looks at him seriously with clenched fists. Leo has a smile on his face and says he shouldn't waste it because that would be a sin. What an absurdity to kick food. This leaves Duran completely consumed by electrifying rage, and he promises to slap that smug smile off his face. A hand is placed on the boy's shoulder as he says he can't stand weaker people acting all pompous. We then see Professor Ain with his arms wrapping around the 2 boys in a tight hug, and no one even noticed him arriving. The 2 students think it's crazy that he was so fast, and the man says they are standout students from the regions, and one is even a representative. With a threatening look, he asks how they can be starting a fight on the first day. They are sweating cold, with wide eyes because the instructor says they seem to need a lesson. We are transported to the place where the classes of the Chivalry Studies Department take place, and it looks like just another sports stadium. Ain is in his typical green suit with his arms crossed, eyes closed, while he remains completely silent. The students are standing there, and one of them raises his hand and asks the teacher if it's not time to start the class, while Celia wonders where the hell her cousin is. Suddenly, a hand grabs the entrance portal to the area, and we don't know who is in such desperation. We notice it's the 2 dear ones who were just fighting in the cafeteria, and now they have arrived breathless and out of breath in the classroom, sweating profusely. Duran continues to enter, and Leo wipes his face at the same time his cousin approaches him, asking what happened. We see the boy from the central region biting his lips in anger, and Leo discreetly looking at him, while the girl asks if they got into a fight. Sweaty and still in his little suit, our boy tells her he will explain. A little while later, the teacher tells them that since all the students are gathered there, they can start the elective class. Smiling for the first time since his debut in the story, our sadistic Ain welcomes the newcomers. He introduces himself by name and states again that he is the instructor for the first-year students in the Chivalry course. Standing side by side, our new bromance begins to blossom in the same vibes as Naruto and Sasuke, and Carl even comments that they are already having mental battles. Stepping on the grass of the stadium, our teacher says that in this first meeting they will talk about the 3 main powers that derive from mana. Walking to one side, he continues saying that we have magical power, spiritual power, and aura, with the last being the hardest to master, and then he asks why that is. Celia quickly takes the opportunity and says, it's because aura loses the fluidity of mana during its use, and Carl looks at her out of the corner of his eye and thinks she's spot on. Ain agrees and says that unlike the other 2, which use mana in a more direct and raw way, aura needs to be refined and synchronized. With the body, he extends one of his hands and begins to condense a cold energy in his palm. He is then seen enveloped in this cold energy and asks them how they can use the aura stored in their bodies. Thoughtfully, our protagonist clenches her fist to emanate flames and wonders if it's just a will, an effort, that is necessary. Promptly, Leo chimes in saying that aura is conjured when mana is spent. The adult says he is very correct, and then asks what is the most essential thing when burning aura. Having a vision of a very tired Duran still from the run a little while ago, we hear the protagonist respond that it would be physical strength. Ain then asks if he was studying the science of aura because once again, he had gotten it right. The boy says no, and the older one thinks it's impressive that someone who hasn't even studied that knows the basic principles of the subject. Our dear instructor gives a smirk. Positioning his foot to prepare to move, he says that the time for theories is over and they should get their hands dirty. Some bystanders are astonished by what they are seeing. It even made me curious to see the next page. Ah, great. We see the adult using small ice platforms that levitate to rise into the air, and he explains that this requires aura focus in the legs and calls them aura steps. Jumping down from up there as if yawning, he says that this requires agility and speed. Giving a brave stare to the students, Ain says that the potential of that use is limitless. The clock's hand ticks as time passes for them. We see that in the meantime, there are students training their aura steps around. Some students are also shown training combat with wooden weapons, blocking and attacking. We see that Celia is mastering her fire steps very well, and she says that if Leo calls her master, she will teach him, but he says he prefers not to comment on that. The teacher notices that Duran has a hostile look and a sphere of lightning in his hands. The student bites one of his fingers, as if contemplating whether or not to do something foolish. The adult then gives a mischievous smile, as if he's thinking about watching the world burn once again. He then claps his hands and shouts for everyone to pay attention, talking about the gossip that had already been circulating about the fight earlier that day. Poor Chelsea was unaware of anything and asks what happened, drawing Carl's attention, who was right next to her. He then whispers to her that it was a really cool thing, which shocks her and makes her want to know the gossip. Ian then orders the two annoyed ones to walk over to him, and they do so respectfully, with their hands behind their backs. The adult then asks the student from the Moira house what is fueling his anger, but the boy turns his face away and says he's not angry. The instructor then commands the two to stand on the running tracks around the court where they are. Facing both of them and the entire class, he tells the representative of the freshman and the top student from the central region to settle the dispute in a one-on-one race. He then adds that they will compete for the position of representative, and that in this race they can use aura without any restrictions. Duran is caught off guard by that information. Some time passes, but the day remains bright with clouds in the sky. We can see that Carl already has a betting sheet in hand, and that some classmates have already placed their bets. He then introduces the opponents as Duran Moira, coming from a long line of pride, and being the master of lightning aura. On the other side, we have the lucky underdog from the streets, the mysterious boy of unknown origin who earned the title of representative, Leo Plav. Some people comment that this would be a good way for the representative to prove himself, as if he hadn't already done that on the ship, right? The instructor then says that no matter the outcome of the race, they must accept it with honor, since this is a commandment of true gentlemen. Celia is thinking about how impossible it is for Leo to win, if we're being realistic. But even so, it's hard to know with him being who he is. We see the protagonist and his rival positioned to start running, with Duran completely surrounded by lightning and thunder. Ain then tells them that the match is on, and the two start running, with the blonde from the central region apparently taking the lead. The boy from the Moira family says he will go ahead. The two start running, with the blonde from the central region apparently taking the lead. Some of the onlookers comment as expected. After all, Duran was totally amazing and famous, while the other was nothing at all. We see Leo with a reddish energy surrounding his feet as he runs in his lane. A pair of bystanders comments on how ridiculous that is, how pathetic it is, and that making such a weakling a representative was definitely a sham. We see our sorceress from the Llewellyn family cheering for our protagonist to get excited and give it his all, like a great supporter. We catch a glimpse of our lightning boy running very quickly. Carl notices that the boy is literally halfway there, and he is quite impressed with that performance. The two are running with Leo not too far behind the boy, until our white-haired boy notices something off the tracks. Suddenly, he starts running off the path, out of nowhere. Celia is left speechless, wondering what the hell he was thinking, and even calls her cousin an idiot. We see the boy's feet still surrounded by that same red energy, and although it's not something big, it seems to give him some skill. Then, out of nowhere, our protagonist leaps across the training area so fast that we only see red streaks where he passed as he heads toward the stands. From up there, he observes his competitor a few meters ahead. With the red force giving him more power, the ground beneath the feet of the Plav boy begins to crack. And then, like a slingshot, he launches himself forward at full speed. From a distance, Duran looks back and sees a red explosion in the stands and is surprised. We then see a red lightning bolt shooting from the explosion site and zooming toward the racetrack. Both we and Duran then see that the red lightning is the protagonist, mocking as always, saying that he is the one in front and calls the blonde a dust collector. Leo then arrives like Dash from The Incredibles at the finish line, in great style. Our boy from the central lands is left speechless when he sees that his effort was for nothing and that the boy managed to surpass him nonetheless. Celia's cousin looks at him with a certain arrogance, and a playful smile plastered on his face. We get a closer view of the damage done to the stands due to Plav's technique. The pair of chatty extras from before start sweating cold when they realize they don't understand what just happened before their eyes. They observe the two runners and comment on how Duran is the fastest among the first-year students, and that even without mastering aura, the other still ended up winning. From afar, Zerdinger recognizes that what Leo used was not an aura step, but rather the Phoenix step, whatever that may be. Carl and Chelsea cheer for their friend's victory and shout about how wonderful and cool he is. Ain remains silent with his arms crossed, watching the duo from a distance. He thinks about how it was expected for the lightning aura to reach extremely high speeds, but Leo had greater raw speed and surpassed in creativity, creating a new type of technique. Being friendly like almost never before, our protagonist extends one hand to his rival and says it was a great race. and that if it were a long-distance event, he would have lost. The loser doesn't seem to appreciate the friendliness and tells our dear one to go pick coconuts, walking past him without shaking his hand. With a silly grin, we see the instructor think to himself that a hero has finally appeared whom he has always dreamed of cultivating. Infatuated and completely turned towards him, Abad's sister says she is impressed with Leo and intends to train with him. Carl wonders why those two are being so acclaimed, and Celia says he must be crazy not to see the reason for that. The boy with orange hair then says that since class is over, everyone could go to the cafeteria to eat, and that it would be a gift from him to his friends. The winner of the race tells them to go ahead of him, and the crowd is somewhat confused about what he could have to do that is more important. Without giving much explanation, in fact, without giving any explanation at all, he just starts walking out of the arena, leaving his roommate talking to himself. He only mentions that he is going to a summoning class, and the two remaining chatty ones wonder what he means by a summoning class, and the cousin says it doesn't make sense. Some time passes, and we see Leo quiet in an open and bright place, pondering a very intriguing thing still on his mind, the pact with the Fairy King being a reward. He remembers the encounter with the figure at the end of the admission test and recalls that normally the rewards from tests are linked to the powers of the test giver. Thinking then of Albie, the boy with white hair says it doesn't make sense for the reward to be a summoning ability, if Albie had nothing to do with summoning. Approaching a very tall tree, he thinks about how useless it is to have that if he can't go to the fairy realm to establish the pact at that moment. Caught by surprise, our protagonist hears someone approaching from behind and questioning why he wasn't in the summoning class. He turns to see who it is and then realizes it is Chen, the standout student from the east, and she greets him as Master Leo. The boy greets the dear one back, and she says he can refer to her as Sia. As we see the light grass and some daisies in the grove, the girl says she was curious to know that he was interested in summoning, since he was a knight in theory. The girl then smiles when he says he plans to train his skills with spiritual techniques, pointing out that they will end up bumping into each other frequently. She also asks what type of spirit he has a contract with, showing her own, which is a small water nymph, and asks him to reveal his. He replies that he hasn't signed any contract yet, and Zia offers to help if he needs tips or information about spirits for summoning. Being very straightforward, Leo says he will remember that and shifts to a rather odd topic to discuss with women, asking what her age is. Smiling, she tells him to go pick coconuts for asking a lady's age, but says she is 17 and that he is a little baby since she saw he is 15 like Celia. The boy thinks that 17 is a very young age, and even so, she still seems younger than Chelsea, who was the youngest in the group at 14. The dark-haired girl with black eyes and a white bow looks at him with one eyebrow raised, and the boy is caught off guard by her stare. She looks closely at his face and asks if he's thinking something rude about her, but the boy averts his gaze and says he's not thinking anything. No way. Chen then changes the subject and says that the competition for the representative title with Duran was quite impressive. The protagonist says he didn't know she was watching that horror show, and then she remembers that she was indeed, and we see the girl in a flashback completely amazed. Back in the present, we see the girl's black shoes on the grass, her feet moving restlessly. Confidently, the girl asks that someday the young boy with white hair accept her challenge. Smiling and somewhat warm, our Don Juan says he will, she can be sure of that. Xia smiles cutely at him upon hearing his response. Let's then go to the invocation department, and there's a light breeze in the place, which is simply an open field well lit by the sun, with some figures standing around. We see that among the students present is our top highlight from the south, Warden Titan, and we also get a better look at a new female character with wavy gray hair. The duo that was already there looks back over their shoulders. Leo and the new friend look ahead, she more cheerful than him, who seems to only smile when it's to mock someone, little devil. He asks her if there are only that handful of students for the class, and she replies that apparently the invocation thing isn't very popular, it seems. He says that makes sense, especially since it's still an elective class, but it's still strange to choose to teach that kind of subject in an open field. We then see a creature with huge scaly wings flying over some students who duck down and protect their heads in fright. With a better view of the winged creature, someone says it's a black serpent, and we can see that it really is a kind of dark dragon like the night, and no one knows where it came from. There's a student who fell sitting on the ground and doesn't know what to do besides scream for the creature to go away as it approaches. We see a woman mock the teenager, saying that the mystical beast seems to like him a lot, and she calls the creature rascal. Descending from the cage that was on the black serpent, a woman with long hair and a ponytail introduces herself as Yura Marnin to the first-year darlings. Throwing her hair back, she adds to her introduction that she's the one who will teach the dummies about invocation throughout the year. The boys have a huge crush on the teacher, thinking how nice it would be if they were her invocations. Leo is smiling affectionately while thinking about what his friend Desenho would say. about the woman being as beautiful as Lucina's and Luna, and it would be funny to see him there. A paw resembling that of a chicken touches the green grass. We see that the paw actually belongs to a beautiful white griffin, which is muzzled and being petted by Carlo, the teacher's assistant. He and his boss explain to the students that they will form pairs to pilot the griffins to reach a specific place, and some pairs start to come together. One of the students protests, saying they've never even seen griffins before, but the animal near him seems to have already developed affection for the human. Threateningly, the woman with golden eyes asks if that's some lame excuse from the kid to avoid participating in the class. The woman then jumps onto her own creature in one leap and says that if that's the case, he can run away, and she doesn't care. Rascal's wings spread open. The creature then lets out a loud scream as it stretches. The students watch as the teacher and the animal take flight once again. Among them is our protagonist. The instructor's assistant seems a bit nervous, restless, and says they should follow her immediately. A female student is on top of a griffin, smiling, and another one is petting it, saying it's calmer than expected. Another animal from another pair is holding one of the boys by his blazer, while the boy struggles. Shia is with Leo, and she asks if it would be a problem for her to guide the reins of their griffin, and he sees no issue in granting that. We then see a large body of water. It could be an ocean or some immense lake. The sun was shining high in the sky, and a griffin feather was falling through the air. We then see some griffins with students flying low, near the waves, while the teacher glides higher with Rascal above everyone. As they fly with Yuxa, some students comment that this is exactly what they always wanted to do, pilot a griffin, while others ask to switch places so they can pilot. The standout student from the east tells our protagonist that she was scared at first, but now she is loving it too much. But Leo tells her to be careful. The brunette goes to pet the animal, saying how cute it was, and at that moment the woman in charge blows a whistle. All the griffins around her reacted differently upon hearing the sound. The animal's eyes widen, as if they were super alert, and their claws became razor sharp. The creatures start to screech and become somewhat aggressive, and the students begin to get really nervous about what is happening to them. Smiling, the woman looks at the teenagers and says that to call themselves Lumern students, they must at least manage to tame a simple griffin. Leo and Zia are gliding when their creature lets out a scream. With the movement, the girl falls on top of the boy and feels embarrassed when he explains that those creatures are proud and that one cannot try to be stronger than them. Then he places his hand alongside hers to control the animal together with her. Calmly, he says that they are fine, but the girl is speechless. The two then take off ahead, with the boy controlling the reins and her closing her eyes due to the high speed. Carlo is flying alone on a griffin and the teacher is with him, observing the students. The woman asks her assistant if that boy wasn't from the cavalry department, and the man replies that as far as he knows, he is. Looking at the boy's file in midair, they wonder if he has a griffin at home because it's not possible for him to pilot so well, but they know he is too poor for that. She is shocked, placing her hand on her chin and thinking aloud that it really is just pure talent from that boy. Looking at him, Yuxa says that there was a hidden gem in a non-noble family. We then see a beach, part of the island of summoned beasts, and we have some students sprawled on the sand with some resting shouts nearby. While most are recovering from the traumatizing experience, Leo walks calmly near some orange trees. He looks at one of the fruits on the trees and thinks about something. Picking one of the oranges in his hand, he sees that there is a feather stuck to the fruit and finds it very strange. Chen asks him if something is wrong as soon as he gets off the winged animal, but he quickly says no, that everything is smooth sailing. While the adults tell everyone not to disperse but to gather to hear the instructions, our boy Plav is feeding his griffin with the orange he picked. The leader says they will have a practical test, and most of the students are completely caught off guard. One even screams in shock that this is still their first day. A grumpy student complained about how that class isn't even fixed, it's still elective. Very straightforward. Our lovely instructor says that compared to the other two main subjects, they have a lot to catch up on. Extending her hands, she begins to channel her magic and says that summoning is much more than just having sensitivity to mana. We see a small fairy appear above her hands, and the explanation that one also needs to have affinity with the spirit to forge pacts with them. We have an image of a woman with red hair petting a griffin to illustrate that one also needs the skill to tame the summoned beings, and that's why there are few summoning heroes compared to the other two branches. That said, the woman asserts that the heroes in that niche who make their names earn more rewards than their comrades in other areas. Someone steps firmly on the grass after the teacher asks if that's not exactly what they want to be there for. The girl who was with Warden, and whose name we didn't know until now, is revealed to be Eliza Hergen, a summoner from the north and from a renowned family, asking what their practical test will be. The teacher reminds her that the island is called the Island of Summoned Beasts, As we see a blue sky full of flying animals, she says that the name suggests it is full of creatures and that since they are like weapons, they will test their domination. Throwing her arms up as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, she concludes by saying it's simple, just tame a beast and bring it to them. If they succeed, they win a free pet. A herd of foolish students rushes through the forest, shouting with excitement that this is exactly what they expected from the Lumerne Academy. Leo hears his name called by someone and turns to see who it is. We realize it's the summoner from the north, and she asks the boy if everyone can expect a spectacular result from the great representative of the newcomers. Warden and Chen stay nearby, attentive to the interaction that begins to unfold. Turning his back to her and continuing his calm walk deeper into the forest, he says he's just trying to do his best. The girl doesn't seem very pleased with the answer, and simply pouts. The adult woman thinks to herself, smiling, that the two of them would probably be the stars of that first year. Somewhere in the forest, with insects buzzing, we see a student making contact with a greenish deer as our protagonist passes by, and another student with a ferret. The boys find it strange that he's walking deeper into the forest and wonder why the representative of the newcomers would be going further in. It seemed crazy. We see our boy walking alone, searching for something inside his blazer. From there, he pulls out the feather he found stuck to the orange earlier. Concentrating his phoenix breath energy, flames begin to surround him and move toward the feather. In the palm of his hand, the object catches fire quickly and disintegrates into ashes, and he comments that it's exactly what he expected to happen. Suddenly, something very bright comes from behind the boy, making him alert and widen his eyes. Suddenly, we are taken to another place, an environment with water and trees scattered across hills. We see someone frying eggs and bacon in a pan, and this person asks a third how Leo is doing. We are introduced to a professional campsite, with a fancy tent, chair, table, cooler, and everything the wealthy would bring to a camping trip, except for the butler. Someone is placing the plates with eggs and bacon on the table and responds to Reina that it's just his first day. We then catch a glimpse of Leo's mother in her running outfit, and the man offers her a mug, asking how she can already be worried. We return to the protagonist, who has a body of fire around him, covering his eyes with his arms. We have a mix of the mother, calm, saying it's a great achievement for him to be there, and the boy, wide-eyed and scared by something, surrounded by fire, saying he sees the phoenix. A voice almost like it's from a dream begins to be heard in the area, from a creature that spots Leo and asks if that's a child with Reina's scent. He asks how they know his mother's name, even though he can't yet see what this figure is like. Then we catch a glimpse of the firebird that replies it knew it was right, and that he indeed looked like a child who would have come from Reina. Opening her wings, the phoenix named Farina tells our boy that she owes everything to his mother, a debt greater than life. She introduces herself to the human, who looks on in admiration and greets her back, welcoming her. The boy introduces himself as Leo Plav, somewhat hesitantly, and asks what she meant by owing something very big and important to Lady Plav. The beast then replies that the woman was the one with whom she had an oath, and that she saved the life of a renowned man named Aaron Lundar. Their eyes widen in surprise, and he repeats in his mind how his mother knows the great Aaron Lundar. The animal responds that at that time, Ellen was on a dungeon conquest mission in Siren, and we see in a flashback him kneeling, all alone and injured. He was without companions at that time, and who saved his life there was our dear mommy. Reina appears, with her sword in hand and shining armor, and Farina says that by doing this, she lost her flame, and if it weren't for that, she would have become a heroine. Our protagonist ponders about his mother. We get a better view of the magical creature, and we see that her feathers are almost reddish, with golden details, and she says that she never regretted what she did. The beast says that this does sound quite like something the former Zerdinger would say indeed, and Plav asks what that entity is doing in Lumerne. She says it's not the time to talk about that, but he also shouldn't be there since he is part of the Knights department, but he says he is training summoning too. Farina's eyes sparkled with excitement and surprise. We see an image of what seems to be the silhouette of Leo's past life hovering above him, and the beast says that it really looks like something he would do, and that it was destiny. Igniting her flames once again as she spreads her wings, Farina says she is happy that at least it is possible to repay the debt she had with the boy's mother. She asks him to extend his hand, and he does, and a strong flame appears there in his palm. The flame suddenly condenses and turns into a very large golden egg, which the phoenix says is a gift for him. As he takes a closer look at the eggshell, he hears the great magical being concluding that as soon as his summoning abilities are ready, she will return. She starts to apologize because she knows he probably wanted something faster, but the boy interrupts, saying they could do it right then. Wide-eyed, she is like, "What, my dear? Are you crazy? This could end up dragging you along, kid." Then he begins to concentrate his magic, and flames erupt from his back as Farina watches him. His red eyes are focused on the egg in his hand, and the mystical creature wonders if it might already be too late. Leo then continues to warm the egg he is holding, as if it were an incubator or something, and the giant bird tells him to give it his all, just like his mother. We then see the boy's eyes getting a bit tired as he looks at something we don't know. In a dark environment like a suspension of reality, we see him levitating and staring at a fire orb right in front of him. Raising one of his hands, he seems to want to try to grasp those flames. Out of absolutely nowhere, the entire environment is consumed by a hurricane of fire with our protagonist surrounded by it. He lets out a groan of pain. It seems the heat is too intense for him, and he thinks he can't even breathe thanks to the phoenix's flame. We see our dear boy's hand black as night because he keeps trying to grasp the flame, and he wonders how the creature endures that every time. Closing his eyes, he says he understands how difficult it must be to live with that pain all the time, and that he will share it with the beast. Back to reality, we see the protagonist without a single scratch and still holding the golden egg, just as the same flames surround him. We see that the eggshell then begins to crack. He is serious and confident, with his eyes focused ahead. The egg starts to levitate on its own in midair and concentrate columns of fire in its direction as its shell breaks even more, and our boy observes everything. With relief, he tells Farina that it worked. Smiling, the creature says the boy is a genius. As the exterior of the egg finishes breaking before their eyes, the creature tells him he will be the greatest summoner the world has ever seen and congratulates him for making the pact. We then see a baby phoenix with red feathers and a yellow tuft in the hands of the boy Plav, and the older creature says its name is Fiora. We see Farina quickly in a human form asking Leo to take good care of her little one, and he thinks it looks more like a chick than a phoenix. The little creature tilts its head to the side very cutely and lets out a chirp, and the boy thinks that for sure it is a farm chick. Far from there, after a while, we see the teacher observing some students bringing their summoned animals, and she even comments to a girl that hers is very cute. Yuxa then asks her assistant how much time is left for the test to end, and he raises his open hand and says there are still 5 minutes. She thought to herself that there were only 4 left, and then she is taken by surprise by the arrival of someone. We then see a gigantic polar bear with bright blue eyes running toward the clearing with its sharp claws. We then see our girl Chen holding a bear cub in her arms, and she looks all worn out but asks if there is still time, and the teacher says it's impressive. A shadow flies over everyone there, catching the girl's attention as she looks up. Holding onto one of the animal's legs is Warden, who soon lands with great ease, and the instructor says that even experienced wizards are afraid of those creatures. He says he couldn't form a contract with that shadow crow, but the woman says it's no problem, and that just taming the creature was great. It's Eliza's turn to return, and she brings with her a giant albino snake with purple eyes, and it's sitting nicely on the creature's head. Explaining that her family didn't have a mystical beast to call their own, she took the opportunity to form a contract with that one, and the adult says it was a great choice. Carlos says the time for the test is over, and the woman thanks God because she couldn't stand those mosquitoes any longer and mentions that the last student is coming back. We then see Leo just entering the clearing, catching everyone's attention, and we also see that there's something on his head. Looking closer, we realize it's the little red chick resting on the serious white head of the boy. Some other students start to mock the sight and ask if he made a pact with the spotted hen, saying he gave up on the class too quickly. But the teacher is astonished by what she just saw, unlike the others, and her eyes widen. Watching the boy return very calmly, she thinks to herself that this kid must be crazy. With the chick dancing cutely on Leo's head, the woman is stunned to realize that it's a phoenix. Later, back at the Lumerne Academy, we see the sun setting. The protagonist in his room seems quite calm as he adjusts the knot of his tie. We see him knock on the door of a room, and the person inside asks the visitor to come in. We then realize that the one in the room is precisely the summoning teacher, near a table, reading some papers, and Leo asks if she wanted to see him. Wearing glasses and leaning on the table, she tells him to sit down because they need to talk about a few things. As the boy sits down, she starts by saying that this was the first time in her entire life that she had seen, with a keen eye on what the older woman has to say. Our boy listens as she points out that she had no idea there was a phoenix living on the island where they went. The woman then goes to him and turns her chair so they can face each other, and says she certainly didn't expect a first-year student to make a pact with a phoenix. The boy is startled by the closeness, unsure how to react. Staring intently at our boy, the older woman shows no hint of a friendly expression when she says she knows exactly who that boy is. The boy swallows hard, fully convinced that his identity has been discovered. The woman hugs him tightly and excitedly, saying she saw from afar that he was a genius master of summoning that no one had ever seen. Putting the chair back in place, she says she really wants to brag about the boy's achievement, but she is sure that keeping the phoenix a secret is the best thing to do. The boy is still in shock at how out of her mind that woman seems, and he hears her say that maybe chaos will ensue if they find out about the pact with the phoenix for now. She places one hand on the boy's shoulders and squeezes, making him sweat cold as she says he has to make the right choice on the last day of elective classes. Radiantly, she says that this choice can only be to study in the summoning department so that this becomes his main focus, and that he has the potential to go down in history. Sometime later we are taken to the Magic Studies building in Lumerne. Inside the building, walking through the corridors, we see our girl Chloe yawning, as she has been sleeping for quite a while, right? She's been missing for ages. A person walks by and tells her to close her big mouth, that a yawn that size would end up dislocating the dear girl's jaw, and she shoots a glare at the speaker. We see that it was Carl who spoke, and that he is accompanied by his roommate, and the orange-haired boy says she looks tired, and she replies that she stayed up late studying. The white-haired boy asks if she is indeed Chloe Mueller, and searches for something in his pants pocket. Extending his hand, he shows her the identity card of the girl he kept with him all this time, and says she can take it. We see a flashback of the day they bumped into each other, with books on the floor, and both of them too. The girl lets out a little squeal of surprise, as she didn't expect that, and thanks the representative, saying she didn't know it was him that day. A door opens and she asks Leo if he is now turning to magic classes, but he replies that he will try everything in the elective classes anyway. As the three sit at a table side by side, the girl from the north says she is planning to be a pure sorceress, so she will only take magic classes. Carl whispers to our protagonist that it makes sense for the Ice Empress to want to be the best mage there. She hears his murmur and gives a deadly glance as she sits down. Our orange-haired boy then stands up and says it's getting very cold there. He then says he will go to the back of the room to concentrate better, but then a column of ice rises right in front of him. We see that there is a wall of ice raised from the floor to almost the ceiling, preventing our betting house owner from leaving, and he is utterly terrified. Chloe gets up from the table and tells Carl that he should sit at the front of the room with her, while Leo just observes that tantrum between the two. Without even flinching, the girl grabs the boy by the back of his clothes and starts dragging him, saying that if he wants to learn, she will teach him, and he protests crying. Another girl calls our protagonist by name, and he widened his eyes upon realizing he recognizes that voice. Looking to the side from where the voice came, he notices the Llewellyn siblings sitting there at a table waving kindly at him. The boy seems quite surprised, which doesn't even make sense because if the siblings were mages, it's obvious they would be there, but that's fine. The classroom door opens, and the person who enters shouts for everyone to feel welcome to the Theory of Magic class. Black, fancy shoes cross the classroom floor making noise. Some female students get excited upon seeing the teacher arrive and whisper among themselves as he says he will be responsible for the subject that year. We see that the teacher is a very well-dressed, dark-haired man named Len Horace, and he is the Theory of Magic teacher for the first-year students at Lumerne Academy. He places his hand on a gigantic stack of papers and says he has to say one thing before they start that elective class. The adult then snaps his fingers and a magical circle with inscriptions can be seen forming, indicating the casting of a spell. As suspected, all the sheets that were in the pile are immediately thrown around the room. To everyone's surprise, they fly to the tables and stop in front of the students at an impressive speed. As Leo takes a good look at the paper that stops in front of him, the teacher says, they will have a test on basic knowledge of the theory of magic. Leaning both hands on the table, he says that anyone who does not pass that test will not be accepted in his classes from then on. Using the tip of his finger, the instructor conjures an hourglass and says that Lumerne students should know at least the basics, so there's no excuse. At a nearby table, a short-haired blonde girl raises her hand and says that when they finish the test, they can just hand it to her, and her name is Anna. Taking the test in his hand, our protagonist becomes completely nervous upon realizing that this test has nothing to do with the ancient magic he knew. The test continues, and some students look attentively at their papers. Some respond to the test with their quills. We see the hourglass counting down as the golden sand falls. Most students finish the test, commenting on how easy it was and asking how they solved certain questions on the test. Frustrated, our protagonist looks at his test thinking about how foolish he was to have only answered one of the questions. Shaking with nerves, he hands his test to Anna, who says he must have done a great job, but he thinks about how he was foolish for not studying anything modern. Leaving the room already feeling defeated, he says there's no way around it. He will have to study magic on his own anyway, and that's it, folks. We lost everything. At that moment, the last grains of sand fall in the hourglass, and Leo thinks about how in the last centuries the formulas have evolved a lot, and the way to use them has also changed a lot. The adult snaps his fingers, and all the tests that had already been graded are thrown back to their respective owners. We see that most of them, upon receiving their results, become quite nervous about their own performance. The man in his giant cloak raises one of his hands in complete silence. Above the palm of that hand, a source of light emerges surrounded by writings in runes. Turning his hand again, the same light is sent to the top of the room and expands to cover the entire ceiling with its galactic aura and magical symbols. The students are enchanted. Len explains that this is the basis of the magical formula he created, and all the students are captivated, boys and girls with shining eyes watching it all. Very seriously, he tells them that he made that formula from scratch, and that he hopes everyone there can create their own formulas. Clenching his palm into a severe fist, he explains that this was the reason he administered that test in the first class. He explains that the exam had some questions based on memorization, and one based on an essay, and he says he hopes everyone will be able to answer the last one someday. Chelsea comments that it makes sense then that she couldn't answer the last one. She then looks at Leo's test and realizes he is not there in the room to see the correction, wondering if he had given up, and that she wanted to have classes with him. Suddenly we see Anna whispering something in the instructor's ear, both standing, and we don't know what it's about. We then find out that she tells him that there was a student who managed to solve the last question, and this causes the man to have a severe mental glitch. He then lets out a very loud and desperate laugh. The present students are quite confused when this happens, and even more so when he says that in all his years in the industry, this was the first time it had happened. Totally enchanted, he looks at the children and asks who it was and asks them to stand up, even with Anna saying it wasn't a perfect score. Very excited, he says it doesn't matter that they left some questions aside to get that one right, and that they could stand up without shame. He is shocked when he hears that in fact the last question was the only one he got right on the entire test, and he asks what the name of the student who achieved this feat is. Looking at a student roster, we see Leo's picture on it. The teacher tells the boy from Plav to stand up, and all the students look at each other, especially Chloe and Carl, who comment to each other that he doesn't seem to be there. Next to her brother, Chelsea raises her hand and informs that he left right after handing in the test. We have a view of the freshman representative's grade at the exact moment Len asks how he just left. Far from there, in an open area with leaves, we see Celia laughing a lot in front of a dessert, asking if he really only solved one question, and left. As she uses a small spoon to poke at the dessert, she talks about how strange it is for him to be a master in summoning but a disaster in magical arts. We see that Leo is sitting in front of her eating a bread roll, and she says he should focus on sword arts if he wants to be a knight, and he asks if she wants to train with him. Like lightning, the magic teacher appears behind Leo and asks if he wanted to be a knight before, and the two students turn to him. With a threatening look, the adult asks why he mocked the test, if he didn't answer the other questions because he found them too easy. Standing in front of the teacher, our protagonist says he must have lost his mind because he definitely bombed the test, and the man doesn't understand. The adult is completely lost and sweating cold when the boy says that besides the last question, all the others were very difficult for him. The two are standing face to face, and we see their boots as the boy explains that he knows nothing about new formulas since he only studied at home with old books. The theory instructor then takes the liberty of picking up our dear boy in his arms and lifting him like Simba from the Lion King, leaving both him and Celia speechless. When he returns to the ground, he is still a bit lost with what just happened, with his eyes shining with excitement. The older man looks directly at our dear boy and asks him to follow him at that moment. Len runs off very excited and almost bouncing while dragging a very confused student by the shirt, and Celia is left alone in the cafeteria watching that happen. Anna arrives at the place, completely out of breath, just as Zerdinger is commenting on how that teacher seemed to be quite a weirdo. The blonde girl asks the girl if she had seen the magic theory teacher by any chance, and the girl says he just left there not even 2 seconds ago. Pulling her colorful dessert closer to herself, she even talks about how he dragged her cousin along when he jumped out. The woman then runs away in despair, thinking that her boss was a completely crazy man who had no idea what he was planning. We have a view of magic being used to levitate some objects, like a chalk eraser. We then see that things are being written on a blackboard, but we can't read them. Next, we have a flying piece of chalk also being powered by magic. To finally understand that all of this was the teacher writing a big problem complete with drawings for our boy to solve. As he grabs the chalk and heads to the board to try to solve all those questions, the teacher watches, thinking that if it wasn't a stroke of luck, he would solve it too. The adult is very anxious about what comes from that answer, and keeps asking, "Please God, show me that answer soon." Finally, holding the chalk in his hand and turning to the adult, Leo reveals that he managed to solve everything. Horace looks at the solution and is completely shocked to realize one thing. He asks the boy if he solved all that simply in his head, and our protagonist says yes, it was a lot of work to write everything down. Hypnotized by adrenaline and happiness, the teacher says that what he had dreamed of finally happened. In another place, still in Lumerne, we see the stylish Professor Albie walking calmly on the stone floor. Suddenly, the magic theory instructor comes running towards him out of breath and shouting. Taking a closer look, he seems genuinely happy about something, very smiley. The other, in turn, looks as expressionless as possible, not understanding any of it and seeming even less interested in knowing what it was about. The dark-haired man throws himself at Albie's feet, who walks away dragging him on the ground while he thanks the blonde instructor profusely. Raising one finger and using his magic, the man in sunglasses makes the guy in the cape levitate and says that he has been silly like that before, but this was too much already. Upside down in the air, Len recounts that the guy he recommended as the representative of the freshmen had turned out to be a magical prodigy. Not understanding anything, Albie asks how that is possible if he was in the chivalry department. Screaming in complete terror, the man in the air says that this couldn't happen at all and that it would be absurd for that genius to be swinging iron around. Anna arrives running just as the blonde lets the other one down from the air and he starts to fall. The woman catches him in her arms before he crashes to the ground while talking about how it would be an insult to magic if a boy like that ended up with a puny little sword. Smiling and suddenly less angry, he thanks Anna for saving him. The deer seems to be a second away from exploding with accumulated tension and says that they need to get to class soon and thinks that one day she will send him to play for Vasco. In the hallway, behind Albie, our protagonist approaches, walking very slowly. Looking at him, the admission test instructor gives a friendly smile while Leo looks serious and cold sweating. The adult continues on his way, thinking about how magic has always been a very inexplicable thing in the end. A week passes, and the temporary classes come to an end. And we can see that the boy Plav is quite relaxed on the roof of the academy reading a vegan little book. He closes the book, and we see that the title refers to Kyle, whether he was really a fraud or not. Sitting and looking at the courtyard down below, the little one remains silent. We then notice 3 people running very quickly towards somewhere. We cut to Kalian, the director, sitting in his office signing some papers when he is interrupted by something. We see that it was the 3 teachers, Yuxa, Ain, and Len, who entered his office looking totally hired and saying that he couldn't do that. The cavalry instructor then shows a paper he brought with him, and it is nothing less than Leo's application form, where he states that he will take all 3 subjects. Behind him, Len and Yuxa shout at each other that the boy belongs to their department, and the third talks to the director that he has to go to cavalry and that no one has done that for years. The older man laughs and remembers that only the founding member of Lumerne completed all 3 formations, and that this is also similar to a hero from the legends. The other 3 adults are left not understanding what he is talking about. The old man might be senile. Standing up, he explains that he is talking about the hero of the beginning, the 5th hero of the past according to some legends. Looking out the window of his office, he loudly says the name of the hero, Kyle, who is also a founding member of Lumerne. We have a view from above of the empty running and athletics field. Empty, if not for 2 runners, Celia and Chelsea, with the former ahead of the latter, who seems to be dying of exhaustion. Carl and Leo are watching the 2 exercise, and the boy with orange hair asks why they don't take a break even on the weekend. As the other sits down, our protagonist explains that the sorceress asked him for help training. We see the 2 running when the better asks where the weapons are then. Celia hears the question as she runs past them and replies that building stamina is more important than weapons. Abad's sister gets furious and repeats to him that having stamina is very important for a mage, and that's why they are running, and tells him to stop interrupting with questions. After finishing the training, we see the 4 gathered and Leo is giving water to his cousin, while Chelsea and Carl stand back to back. The youngest in the group then says it's nice to run when the weather is like that, and says she wants to run with Leo someday. The boy asks if she's serious, and Zerdinger has the reflex to spit out the water she's drinking. The wind sorceress asks what her problem is, and Leo's cousin says she already warned him that she doesn't run with him, even though he said he could keep up. The sharp-toothed boy asks them what kind of relationship the 2 have to be so close, and says that at first he thought they were boyfriend and girlfriend. Irritated, she points to her cousin as if he were a piece of trash and says that that thing over there is her aunt's son. The other 2 are stunned and ask if he is then part of the Zerdinger family, but the brunette says not exactly, but it's a complicated matter. Getting up from the ground, the boy with white hair asks if they should start running again, and while Chelsea is quite excited, his cousin looks like she's going to faint. The other boy, who seems zero interested in physical training, says he's going to take a quick trip to town and continue being a flyweight. As Leo drags his cousin for another training session, she screams and begs him to save her from that torture. Somewhat frustrated, he watches her being dragged and wonders why there aren't any normal and honorable heirs around him, just crazy people. Sometime later, at the end of the weekend, we see everyone gathering for the class division ceremony. Leo is standing at the door of room 5 of the first year, and he seems somewhat thoughtful about whether to enter or not. Carl is inside that same room and calls for his roommate to come closer. He approaches the orange-haired boy and asks how he knew Plav would be there, and the other boy replies that there's nothing he doesn't know. Disbelieving, he asks if the youngest of the Llewellyns is also there, and she sleepily replies that yes, she is there. The orange-haired boy asks what the hell he did to the girl to make her like that, and he says he just did the basics, and she replies that she's never doing that again. Two extras appear and ask how many of those newbies will have dropped out, quit, or been expelled by the end of the semester, calling them lazy freshmen. Someone approaches from behind the two while they are bullying and says that they are the ones who seem to be complete lazy bones. The two turn to see who has arrived, and they are sweating cold with nerves. We see that it is an adult not seen before, with a scruffy beard, long hair with bangs, and a threatening look. We find out that his name is Harlan Edman, and that he is the counselor for room 5 of the first year. He orders the two to make a chair for him, and the two then get into a push-up position, while the adult walks towards them. Sitting on the two students quite relaxed, he says it's a displeasure to look at the faces of the losers who are there. The man then welcomes them to the time with the counselor of the freshman class with the lowest scores. Quite frightening, he says that those who are there have probably already heard of him in the halls. As the students chat among themselves, he mentions that his nickname is Wall of Lament, and asks if they know why he volunteered to be their class advisor. Carl asks if it's because he really wants to help them improve their grades. The adult then says that the boy fits perfectly into the worst class, and the orange-haired student is completely shocked by those words. He asks the group, whom he calls unqualified, if they at least know what the students of that academy are tasked with doing. Chelsea says they must conquer the hero world through missions. Harlan says she is right, but they seem like they couldn't even take care of a poodle, and everyone is shocked when he says they don't want people like that. Crossing his legs, he says that people like that drag their partners into ruin, and that's why he is in that class, and that's why they call him Wall of Lament. All the students present are deeply affected as soon as they hear those words, except for Leo, who seems to be quite relaxed. The adult notices this, as the white-haired boy appears very calm and unaffected. He looks out the window, and at that exact moment, the advisor concludes that he will definitely survive this. The other students are still downcast, and he tells everyone to put on their gym clothes and head to the training arena, as it's time for combat training. We then see the open-air place with several little people walking from a distance, looking almost like ants. Near a wall, the group from Class 5 gathers, and the only one with distinctive hair is our protagonist. An umbrella opens even though the day is bright and sunny. A fabric chair is positioned, and next to it, a special neck pillow can be seen. The advisor sits in the chair under the umbrella, legs crossed and a juice in hand, and says that everyone there is new to the academy, and that he will tell them the truth. With his prescription glasses, he calmly asks the teenagers what they think would save them in a serious fight that could determine who gets dragged down or not. A previously unknown newcomer responds that she thought it would be the mission partners protecting each other, and her name is Nella Carvin. The adult then replies that she is wrong, and that what saves in such a fight are their own individual skills, and that only by improving them can they protect others. Someone raises their hand and says that she is more than ready to defend her teammates in battle. Not impressed at all, he makes a sound of disbelief and then asks if they can see the skills of such a confident knight, requesting her to create a fireball. She does as he asks, and we see that the person who raised her hand is a girl with long red hair tied in a ponytail, and her name is Ilyana Layden. Stirring her juice of indecipherable flavor, he calmly asks if that was the best she could do, saying that it wouldn't even scratch an ant. Smiling mischievously, she places one hand over the other when he tells her to increase the magical power she is using. Suddenly we have 2 fireballs being fueled by the girl, one in each hand, while the others around watch and wonder how it's possible. Drinking from the juice and not showing much excitement, the adult says that doubling the size and amount was indeed impressive. Creating a small sphere of wind on one of his fingers, he asks the girl to hit that with the gigantic fireball she made. Next, we see that the small wind ball has turned into a summon, which appears to be a small green wind fairy. The tiny creature darts like lightning towards Ilyana, who is left unsure of how to react. The fairy places a hand on the tip of the red-haired girl's nose and covers her own mouth while giving a friendly giggle. This seems to irritate the human greatly, who grits her teeth and starts trembling like a chihuahua. She then screams and begins launching her fireballs, trying to hit the summon, which seems to dodge everything with great ease, moving back and forth. The little green thing stops beside its master, smiling, and he says that it's pointless to increase the size of the attack if she can't hit a shot, and that the key is control. The other students appear quite discouraged when the adult says this and tells them to keep pushing their own limits. Next, both he and the invocation make a face, and he says that the class won't end until someone catches the sylph. Leo, who had been very quiet until then, realizes that although the guy is being very harsh, he is not wrong in his words. He then decides to try to participate in that dynamic, and the adult watches him run off. Now alone, with everyone else running after the little green creature, the man tells himself that he is excited to see what the boy does. Watching the boy from behind, he wonders if he is just a talker like the big-mouthed hero named Kyle, and we see that he perceives the boy in the same way. At another point in the environment, we see the little fairy dodging many attacks from various students, including Ilyana, as if it were nothing. We then notice that someone else is arriving at that mystical game of tag, with a reddish energy enveloping their feet. Like a version of lightning, the person who just arrived takes off down the track, causing the other students to freeze. We then see that it is Leo, who is inside the red lightning and moving like a rocket, while the teacher wonders if he will be the best of them all. Chelsea and Carl watch their friend putting on a performance worthy of Hollywood, and the girl wonders how he can be so fast. We see a bit more of the boy running with focus and determination. The boy seems to be using the techniques he learned from Ain to create aura steps, but in his own way, to move faster towards his goal. The protagonist jumps high, going above where the smiling fairy is flying with great friendliness. The boy extends his fully open hand and falls towards the creature, which looks back with apprehension. Even though our dear one's movement was great, the sylph manages to escape his capture by flying to the side. But this doesn't seem to be something the boy didn't foresee. He actually gives an optimistic little smile. The boy begins to create something in his hand of a dark red color, as if it were a mass made of magical ketchup. This same mass stretches towards the fairy, who seems not to be expecting it and appears to be desperate. We see that before Leo can succeed in capturing the beloved fairy, someone zooms past him like the golden lightning of Konoha and grabs the creature in their hand. The white-haired boy lands on the ground just as the boy who captured the fairy stops advancing. We then realize that it is our golden little show-off from the Moira family, holding the small being that struggles in his hand uselessly. Someone appears clapping, with their hands wearing white gloves, looking like a very classy person. Behind Duran, a man with long white hair appears, saying that apparently, the first class has to show the fifth class how it's done. We find out that he is Sejin, the tutor advisor of the first class, and apparently the vice champion, and Harlan asks if he wants to tutor 2 classes and spare him the work. While he drinks his juice, the man nicknamed the Wall of Lament is revealed to be the champion of the teacher's competition. The new tutor of our story seems quite unsettled by how relaxed the other is with what should have been a provocation. Along with Leo and Chelsea, our sharp-toothed boy says that things are going to get good since the 2 pillars of Lumerne are going to fall in, and the protagonist asks what he means. Carl then explains that those 2, who don't even seem that old, have been teachers for over 2 decades, and that even Ain, Yuxa, and Len were their students long ago. Nella, the new girl with short light pink hair, approaches and asks how he finds out about such things. Chelsea feels disgusted upon realizing that the 2 seem to be flirting, especially when he says he is simply the best when it comes to acquiring information. Sejin tries to turn things around, making a little joke about how that silly game of being the tutor advisor of the worst class in that whole place doesn't make sense. The long-haired old man then materializes a baby blue ball in his own hand and says it doesn't matter because soon he will understand what the Wall of Lament is all about. Pointing the ball at the other teacher with a very mischievous smile on his face, he then proposes a competition between the first class and the fifth class. Harlan is caught off guard when the other suggests that it will be a baseball match in the historic game dance of the Lumerne Academy. Jumping up super fast, the tutor of the defeated class says that Sejin is a loser, and the man even drops the blue ball in shock from that movement. The 2 shake hands. The man with black hair says that indeed the best lessons come through practice, but the other adult says that class 1 won't go easy on them. Harlan throws himself back in his chair and says he doesn't care about a competition and tells him to figure out how to fight alone, totally stressed for being treated like a nobody in front of the students. Sejin thinks it doesn't make sense that he lost the teacher competition to that guy every time. Duran and his tutor then leave quietly, while our other guy sitting in the chair calls for his sheep. He tells them that they will have the chance to practice their skills in that silly match they will have with Class 1, a game of Bastara, whatever that is. As he adjusts in his chair, he asks the dear students to pay attention to one thing. With a serious and firm vibe, he tells them that if they lose that game, everyone from that class will be expelled. The people present are absolutely shocked by what the man just said. They think the guy is joking, especially since it's only the first day of class and the other class kind of has 3 standout students enrolled. Harlan then says that this is just another reason for the dear ones to work even harder and push their own limits. We see that the kids are almost paralyzed just at the thought of having to participate in a competition. The glamorous adult then puts a little hand on his head, just like Ariana Grande's pose in My Everything, and asks why they are so nervous. Pointing at Leo, he says they are complaining with full bellies, especially since they have the representative with them, the guy who signed up for all the subjects. Quite the rascal. Our dear tutor with black hair orders the protagonist to choose 6 people from there to represent the class in the Bastara game. Staring intently at the adult, the boy thinks that this is clearly a test. We then notice that other students are also looking at him, but the boy finds it strange because the tutor doesn't seem to hate him enough to make them turn against him. While everyone looks at him, the boy thinks that maybe the man wants him to lead the students of that class, since many seem to have lost the will to be there. We see an image of Sejin holding a stick with green energy with both hands, and I think that must be something that happens in Bastera. We then see the Bastera field, all lit up, and he thinks that game will be the starting point for them to turn things around and find their enthusiasm again. We see that among the people representing Class 1, we have Celia and Duran, who seem very confident, and among the students who will compete for Class 5, we have Carl, Chelsea, and Leo, with the first two being quite nervous. The protagonist asks them why they are all so scared about it, and the girl stutters a bit in response. The girl from the Llewellyn family says that he probably doesn't understand what the sport is about because he is poor and comes from the suburbs, but it's a game of ball and fighting. Carl then adds that actually, it's a game with a ball, but is super mega ultra dangerous. The attention of the Llewellyn girl is caught by someone who asks why she is so downcast, so gloomy. We see that it's Celia mocking the little one, asking if she is already admitting defeat, and she retorts that there is no defeat and asks who she thinks she is. An arm unexpectedly wraps around the girl's shoulders, making her stop talking. We realize it was Leo hugging Carl and the girl from behind, and to everyone's surprise, it was affectionately while he said that they from Class 5 would not lose. The girl Zerdinger gets extremely irritated by this affront from her cousin and says he will see how she is after so much training, and Chloe is just listening. We then see that the girl from the north is very determined and focused on the upcoming clash, saying that the boy Plav won't know what hit him. Sometime later, Professor Kejin calls all the participating students to the field and threatens to play Taylor Swift if they don't hurry up. Our dear protagonist asks his classmates who is excited to join him, but almost everyone stays very quiet. We then see a person stepping onto the green field of the sport, taking the lead. The girls Chelsea and Ilyana enter the grassy field. The mage says he will put them in their place, and the taller one says she won't lose and get expelled, and that she will show what she can do. We see Nella and another boy who looks a lot like her also on the field, and the two are a bit tense, in silence and sweating cold. They shout to Carl that he will be the 6th member of the team, and he is hiding behind an extra because he is totally scared, asking if they hate him. The team captain, representing the newcomers, tells the tutor that the 5th grade team is ready, even though his roommate is all disoriented, and he responds okay then. The man then starts playing with the ball, tossing it up and down in his hand, very focused. Finally, he throws the ball up to start the match, and all the students become totally tense with this. Like Chelsea sweating cold, Carl with his mouth open, Leo very serious, the boy resembling Nella biting his lips, Ilyana very focused, the extras nervous, Nella with wide eyes, Duran very angry, Celia determined, a girl with bangs and an ear-piercing smiling, and Chloe completely expressionless at the exact moment the tutor shouts that the game is over, and Moira and Plav jump to try to catch the ball. The two touch the ball, but the angry blonde is just a little above. And then, as expected, the boy catches it and comes down to the ground like a lightning bolt while our protagonist is still in the air, looking at him intently. Class 1 therefore won the chance to start first, and our white-haired boy asks the boy who looks like Nella to explain the game. The boy then explains that the rules are quite simple. It's all easier than they think, and he says they just have to throw a ball with aura into the goal using their body. Tade Moreta, from the summoning department, finishes explaining that it can be any part of the body, and the first team to score 11 points is the winning team. Someone shouts that the Class 1 crowd is heading towards them, and tells them to get ready while Duran's hand closes, channeling electric energy. The orange-haired boy from Class 5 seems to be defending the goal, and he also looks super tense. We then see that our boy from the central region threw the energized ball towards our protagonist boy who stands still like a wall. To dodge the brute attack that comes close, he jumped to the side and the ball hit the ground hard and bounced off him. We see then that, at the speed of light, the ball that just bounced off the ground zipped past Carl's head, hitting the goal squarely. Leo crouches down and looks back, very thoughtful about what was happening. The Class 1 crowd goes wild for Duran, punching the air and roaring his name. Meanwhile, the group with Class 5 stayed very quiet, looking to the side, a bit embarrassed and downcast. Tade gets tense and comments out loud that he is sure they will end up being chased out of that place. The protagonist then asks what gives the players the right to attack in that game, and the boy replies that there are 3 ways for this to happen. It can be when the ball is in the enemy's possession and is running across the field, or when you take the ball yourself, and there is a third reason that we still don't know. Nella shouts for someone on their team to duck, interrupting the explanation about the reasons. Leo and Tade look at her in surprise, almost thinking it might be too late. The ball hits Ileana hard and she is thrown back. We see that the ball was thrown by our girl Zerdinger, and she is triumphant, while asking what those two were whispering about in the middle of the game. We see that Tide is on the ground, holding Ileana, who is in a lot of pain after being hit right in the stomach, and our protagonist boy is standing quietly beside them. The boy Masita then finishes explaining that attacking and blocking an opponent is prohibited, as just happened with the girl who was hit and could no longer continue. As the ball rolls on the ground, the boy concludes that you can only attack in the game through throwing the ball. Our protagonist thanks for the explanation, using his hand to pick up the ball from the ground. Holding the ball in his hand and striking a totally magazine cover pose, he then says that it was their time to score. From the score of the game, we see that Team 5 is already down one player since Ileana has already been out of the game at this point. Off the field, Harlan is still sitting back in his chair, arms crossed behind his head while Sejin stands with his hands in his pockets. The old man with long white hair remains completely silent as he thinks about how destructive that sport is, and teams with high firepower have a significant advantage. Thinking of Celia, he notes in his mind how her family is the definition of firepower, the most powerful among the mages. The long-haired adult says that even though they have the girl Zerdinger defending Team 1, he knows that his colleague has some plan to deal with that. Then he notices that the Wall of Lament is sleeping, and grumbles about how he can sleep when someone else is talking, but the other wakes up immediately. Adjusting his glasses, the tutor of Team 5 asks if the other remembers when they took a Zerdinger child. As a disciple many years ago, stopping to think about the girl from the Fire family long ago, the tutor of Team 1 says that, of course he remembers. There's no way to forget the Empress of Bastora. The man with the scruffy beard then says that the son of that same Empress is there in Team 5. This information causes our dear long-haired tutor to be alarmed. Seeing two blue flags atop two masts nearby, you can hear several cheers for Celia and the boy Moira. After some time in the game, we see two bystanders grumbling about how Team 5 is defeated, and that they shouldn't have even dreamed of entering that academy. We see a sports ball engulfed in fire, reflected in the eyes of one of those boys, thinking that soon that dream would end in a puff. Elsewhere on the field, our female protagonist's dear friend is face to face with someone and points out that he finally seems to have decided to go for it. We notice that she is talking to her own cousin, who is facing her, surrounded by flames and holding the ball in his hand. As the boy prepares to throw the ball with all his might, taking a big leap, someone shouts to get ready because here comes the bomb. The protagonist throws the ball high enough to send it toward the big goal at the opponent's end, and it seems like it will hit the mark. However, Chloe defends by placing both hands on the ground and making a large wall of ice rise in front of her defense line. We then see that the ball was thrown with enough force to enter the ice wall and create a hole, but not enough to pass through and score. Chloe feels quite pleased with herself upon realizing that her strategy worked, and she comments that as long as she is there, it's impossible for Team 5 to score any points. We see that the boy quickly transported himself closer to her using speed, and she only realizes when he says that nothing is impossible. Taking a high leap to get near the ball, our protagonist prepares to land a powerful punch on the ball stuck in the ice. He then delivers his attack with a clenched fist and strikes the object trapped in the ice, causing the large structure to begin to break. This makes the ball fly toward the goal, and the mass of ice shatters almost completely, leaving Chloe paralyzed in shock at all of this. The long-haired, white-haired tutor is also astonished, thinking to himself that the combat sense of that brat is completely impressive. Meanwhile, the other instructor has a smug and confident, yet subtle smile on his face, complete with his fashionable sunglasses. We then see the fans punching the air and shouting, most of them calling out our protagonist's name and encouraging Team 5, saying they can win. Sejin then murmurs to himself that he is understanding what is happening there, stating that the game is just beginning. We then see some other points being scored, such as when our girl Zerdinger shot a flaming ball with great determination, making the score 2-1, or when the sharp-toothed betting boy used his earth magic to raise a stone barrier and block a fiery attack, holding the game at 5-4. And there was also when Chelsea used her green wind chains to launch the ball and nearly leveled the match with a score of 7-6. In the midst of all this, we also see that some participants were taken out of the game by others, like Tide getting hit in the stomach by Duran. And when the score was 10-9, the girl from the other team with piercings and bangs is also taken out of the game by a flaming ball. We see our girl from the north extend her hands forward and begin to concentrate her magic to conjure snow right in front of her and prepare to face something. We also see that the team in possession of the ball is Team 1, and the guy from the central region has electricity coursing through it and is preparing to make an attack. He shoots the ball like a cannonball towards the opponent's goal, and Carl stays alert to the movement. We see the trajectory of the ball like a path of lightning, zigzagging. An open hand reaches out to try to catch the ball. We then see that it was our orange-haired boy, and he holds the electrified ball with both hands, gritting his teeth and closing his eyes with all his might. His feet feel the ground and his legs wobble after preventing his team from conceding another goal. Very tired, all dirty and worn out, we can see that the dear boy smiles, and he says that his mana has run out a long time ago. He then throws the ball to his roommate and teammate, asking him to continue the game. Leo silently thinks about how the boy had done a great job while Chelsea and Ilyana helped the poor goalkeeper off the field in tatters. We see the score once again and realize that the game is 10-10, and someone commented that only Leo is left on Team 5, while on the other side, there are 3 standout students. Someone reaches down to retrieve Bastera's ball. As we see our boy with the ball in his hands, someone comments that there's no way. Having only one person on the team puts everything at a disadvantage. Chelsea is frighteningly serious with her blue aura surrounding her as she tells him that she may have lost to the dear one in the magic test, but she won't lose here. We then notice that, with her magic, the girl created several ice clones of herself that are staring intently at the opponent. On his side of the field, the protagonist looks at his adversaries, the 3 standout youths, including his cousin, and still with the help of the ice clones. Celia and Duran are already channeling their magical energies, both with serious expressions, and the girl shouts for her cousin to hurry up. The boy flexes his feet to set off towards his goal, but something is different now, as his energy is no longer the red color of Argentine apples. Like a green lightning bolt, the white-haired boy leaps into the air, barely noticeable to the others. Both the fire girl and the ice girl, along with our brave boy, are shocked by the movement, thinking about how fast he was with that. Leo moves with such speed that he seems to have made clones of himself, but that's not the case. Like Dash from The Incredibles, he runs right past the brunette, who becomes very worried and shouts to Chloe that he intends to score alone. The girl from the Lands of Night thinks to herself that this strategy is quite poor, and that it wouldn't be hard to hit him just because he seems to have cloned himself. Suddenly she becomes very alarmed because she realizes there's something fiery about it. The girl finds herself surrounded by 5 different versions of Leo, and then realizes it's a very basic illusion magic. But even so, even thinking it was something basic to do, she stands still and stunned by it all. We see the girl kneeling, with her hands on the ground, right in front of the goal and with the sky full of clouds above while the sun shines. She looks around desolately and tells herself that this was star magic and she can't explain what it is because she doesn't even know yet. But soon after she clears all our doubts, the diva, because we see our boy Leo triumphant after the goal, and she asks how a human can use elf magic. We look at the score, and the narrator confirms in all letters that the winning team is Team 5. Many people at the venue start shouting in celebration, calling out Leo's name, who apparently saved the academic fate of many. The 2 background characters from the team who are always grumbling, hug each other crying and comment on how happy they are to escape expulsion, thinking they were going home. Sejin then listens to that chatter and, very irritated, looks at his fellow instructor and asks what they were talking about. What do you mean expulsion? And Harlan is caught red-handed. He talks about having used that threat as motivation, and our tutor with long white hair looks at his 3 remaining students on the field, completely shaken by their loss. Putting one hand on his head, he lets out a heavy sigh and falls into total silence. The adult then takes calm, short steps across the grassy field. He extends one hand to the girl who is knocking over books sitting on the ground and asks if she is very sad about losing the game. Some birds fly across the sky, near the sun, and he helps her up and says that after a match, it's expected for teams to greet each other, regardless of the outcome. He explains that even though they lost, from start to finish, they helped each other and united for a cause, for Class 1, and she listens quietly, reflecting. We then see other bystanders listening to the words of our Lord Savior of instructors. Friendly and confident, he says that everyone should hold their heads high and feel proud of themselves. The students are left speechless, just bringing their hands to their hearts to feel them warm, and one of them simply says that the teacher is really cool. At that very moment, Harlan appears making provocations and telling the losers not to stand still, but rather to help clean everything up. Another view of the arena from the outside appears. Someone said that both classes were great and put on a show on the field. We get another glimpse of Duran and Celia, with someone saying that the Class 1 folks should be proud for having showcased their talents and skills without hesitation. Once again, we have our protagonist alongside his classmates Chelsea and Carl, with someone saying that the Class 5 crew didn't back down and fought until the end. We see that the one giving that inspiring speech is precisely the tutor who started this challenge, and he says he hopes everyone continues to surpass themselves and be friends outside of there. The teams face each other and shake hands, and everyone smiles except for the boy Plav and the boy Moira, who are always frowning. Celia says she was surprised that Abad's sister lasted so long, and she didn't say it mockingly, but as a compliment. The other in turn replies that she was also very happy to see the girl in action and being so persistent, since she previously thought she was as soft as a squid. Carl is chuckling and calls Duran Princeso, saying that this time, they won. The boy from Class 1 remains in a very dangerous and almost fatal silence, looking directly into the eyes of our orange-haired friend. We cut to Chloe, who has her head down and is holding back tears that are still starting to roll down her cheeks. Someone extends a hand to her and says that she should be proud of having done so well in that match. Standing in front of the girl from the north, we see that it is none other than our protagonist Don Juan, saying that she is going to become an incredible talent. A bit skittish like a scared street cat, she asks if he is making fun of her. Still with his hand extended and an honest smile on his lips, the boy doesn't respond and just holds firm. Silent and still a bit stressed, she looks at the boy's hand. At the moment she decides to shake his hand and move it for the sake of sportsmanship, she also promises herself that she will beat him someday. A month passes since the classes started and faced off in a game of Bastera, and we see Carl sitting with Chelsea and Leo asking about clubs. They are having coffee together when the orange-haired boy asks which clubs they would participate in, and the duo nearly faints when the protagonist says he is thinking of starting his own. Not knowing how to be subtle in the art of flirting, the witch girl says that if it's a club that the Plav boy is going to make and participate in, then she is very in, and Carl asks what it will be about. Catching them off guard, he replies that he plans to found a hero research society, and the friends repeat the name of several words, trying to understand. The boy says he wants to create a group to research more about the forgotten hero Kyle, known as the hero of the beginning, and he thinks of the silhouette of the beloved. Carl says that guy isn't historical, he's fictional, and that no one is going to join that club. Like a madwoman driven by passion, the beloved Wind Witch thinks that if no one joins, it will just be her and him in the club, and then she screams that she offers herself as tribute for the games. Suddenly, some commotion begins to happen, and several extras start running toward the cafeteria windows making "you" sounds and calling others to look outside. Carl then stands up too, telling his friends that he had forgotten what day it was, and the girl asks him what the hell he is talking about. The three then get up to head toward the excited crowd, getting quite close with the orange trying to weave through them. Leo's roommate then responds that it was the day the fifth-year students returned after conquering the hero dungeons, and we see a group arriving. The narrator explains that there are several fragments of the hero's memories scattered around the world, and that sometimes they go a bit crazy and create hero dungeons. We then see our trio of students pressed against the cafeteria glass, and the boy Plav thinks that for the Lumern students to recover the fragments takes between 2 to 4 weeks. He thinks of his mother, how she must have been in the past, and concludes that she must have gone through that at some point too. Chelsea is awestruck by the style of the veterans who seem to strut around so poshly, and says that those are the best students of Lumern, and Carl is clearing his throat to speak. He starts to list the veterans and says that the big guy in front, who looks like an Electrolux with all that muscle, is named Ri Zalma. Next, he talks about the woman from the south who is next to him, with glasses and a red headband, named Torua Yan. Finally, he asks himself if the blonde person wearing a hood could be the veteran called Ulta, and then he talks to himself again, saying that there is someone missing and that it might be the most remarkable person, and Leo asks who it is just as someone taps him on the shoulder. At the exact moment, Carl answers that it would be the man who was at the top of Lumern and was the president of the student council named Reese. The hand pulls the boy Plav back. When the talkative roommate turns around to ask something to his classmate, he realizes that the dear one is no longer there and wonders where he went. We see our dear boy being dragged by the hand, and then he asks Celia what is happening. We then realize that it was his cousin who pulled him out of the cafeteria, and she is being quite mysterious, saying that she needs him to follow her to a place, and he asks where that would be. Turning to the boy, she says they are going to the city of Lumeria because the student council president urgently wants to speak with him. He asks what a guy he doesn't even know wants to talk to him about, and she says he needs to learn to respect big people and that he will understand when they get there. Some time passes, and the two arrive at the designated meeting place, with both sitting at a table and the girl wondering why he wanted to meet right there. At the moment, the boy says she could stop complaining because the place has a delicious smelling food. She opens a very sincere smile. She then shouts that her brother has arrived and runs into the boy's arms, jumping and hugging him, which he immediately returns. Celia's older brother, Riss Zerdiger, greets his cousin and says he heard people talking a lot about him, and asks if he is aiming to graduate in all 3 areas. We then see a seemingly delicious food being cut with a fork and knife. It looks like a Chinese dumpling. The 3 are sitting at a table, with Celia and her brother side by side, and on the other side of the table we have Leo, who says the dumplings are wonderful and suit his taste perfectly. Riss then asks his sister what happened for her to have such a strange face while eating a dumpling, and she says she has never tried one of those in her life. The dear girl then brings the piece she cut to her mouth, sweating cold. She then chews, and after tasting it, her eyes light up and her cheeks flush as she says that dumpling is indeed delicious. The older brother then says that this was the restaurant he wanted to take her to when she entered the academy, and then he turns to the protagonist and says that he is his aunt's son. He then asks if the fifth-year student knew his mother, and he replies that he met her a few times when he was younger and that she was quite famous in her days at the academy. And then the protagonist asks how his mother was famous, and the boy Zerdinger responds that she left a ton of legendary stories during her time there. We see Reina's red, focused eyes as the boy says he knows one of the stories. For example, they say that when the dessert wasn't good, she would take a group to the principal's office, and Celia asks how she was the main character of that legend. We then see an empty plate after everyone has finished eating, with the cutlery left inside it. We also catch a glimpse of the two Zerdinger siblings talking. The boy seems to be laughing at a story the girl is excitedly telling. The white-haired boy observes the two in silence and thinks to himself that it makes sense for the boy to be considered one of the strongest in the academy. Taking a better look at his cousin, he concludes that it's just a matter of time before he rises to the levels of heroes. Getting up from the table with a smile on his face, the student advisor asks if they are ready for dessert, and his sister lets out a loud yes and claps her hands. The black-haired boy says he will pay the bill and that the kids can wait for him outside, and the brown-haired girl nods in agreement. As the freshmen walk toward the exit, Riss notices something strange while searching for his wallet in the pockets of his blazer. He pulls out an unidentified object that looks like a transparent box with some kind of crystal in the center. Zooming in on the object, we see that it appears to be a white frame with a piece of stone inside, and he wonders why it was suddenly glowing. Far away, at the Lumeran Academy, we see a blackboard with some scribbled words, and then we hear a door slam open. A pair of crossed feet on the table, wearing expensive shoes, appears just as someone shouts to Professor Harlan that they have a question for him. He, with his feet on the table, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed over his chest, asks what Ilyana Layden wants, coming to his office with a silly question. With her hand raised, the girl with red eyes and hair asks why the 5th class still doesn't have a leader chosen among them. We see that she was accompanied by another classmate, and then the dear girl says that all the other classes had already chosen a leader or had one assigned, and Tade responds with a, well yeah. Using his pinky finger to clean his ear, the lazy professor says she is right. It's just that he had completely forgotten about that leader nonsense. Without thinking twice, he looks at Leo and tells him to take the lead, and that's all good. The girl is in shock and screams how so? But this boy is going to accumulate all the positions that exist, and Tide said it would be fairer if that was decided by vote. A heavy stack of papers is dropped on the wooden table with some aggression. Ilyana is shocked when the adult gives an order for the class leader to take all those papers and organize them neatly in alphabetical, chronological, and importance order. She then quickly shuts her mouth, becomes very meek, and sits back down on the stool to avoid getting in trouble. From the speakers scattered throughout the academy, a voice announces that there will soon be a collective class for everyone on the studies of heroism. The students pay attention to the announcement, which concludes with the voice instructing all first-year students to prepare to go to the auditorium at that moment. When the announcement ends, the white-haired boy asks if they can start getting ready, but Harlan snaps his fingers and says that's why he is the class leader. In the hallways, the students chat without much pretense, and they don't seem very excited about what's coming. Among the gathered students, we see that Carl and Leo are also present, and something catches the orange-haired boy's attention. We realize that it is none other than Chloe Moeller, the ice controller, who looks directly at the boys with a fatal and tired gaze. The girl is holding a book close to her body, and her eyes are deep from so many dark circles, and she asks Carl if he has anything for fatigue recovery from insomnia. She wants everything. We catch a glimpse of the boy handing over some vials of yellow potion to the girl. He brings with him a magical backpack, and looking inside, he says that he really only had these vials with him for now, and the protagonist tells her to ease up on the effort. The girl seems to ignore him and quickly drinks one of the vials as soon as it's in her possession. Silently, she uses the back of her hand to wipe her mouth. Without many words, she simply says that everything is fine and turns her back to the boys, going to hide among the extras again. Carl says that she is very tense, even though she is ranked first in the magic theory class, and Chelsea says that she is probably just too anxious. And then the Llewellyn sorceress says that the moment Leo learns the modern formulas, he should surpass her in the subject as well. The boy from the Thomas family asks what the problem is with being the second best at something, and the mage replies that he is an idiot for asking that, because she comes from the tower. We have an explanation that, for her, as a battle sorceress, it doesn't matter if she isn't the best scholar, but for someone from the wizard's tower, that is all that matters. Crossing her arms indignantly, she asks how he cannot know that this is about pride and questions if he is really a mage, to which he replies that it's obvious, he uses magic to make a living. She raises an eyebrow at him like the WhatsApp sticker when he says that pride for him is magic to earn his daily bread. Wow, I even rhymed. Chloe is very quiet in the crowd while she listens to the girl shout for the boy to go fix the bridge he broke after that foolishness. Elsewhere, we see a man carefully using a cloth to clean the leaves of a plant. Then we have a view from another angle, with a man with white hair and beard turned away from us. As expected, this man is the director of the academy, and he seems quite serious upon discovering that the page of the wounded hero was reacting. We see a cushioned box carrying a small piece of white paper, and someone asks if it's true that that piece of the hero's page was reacting. Riss is in Kalian's office and he explains that even though that ridiculous little thing shouldn't even be called a page, it did react, right in the restaurant he was at. The older man is sitting at the table, looking at the object the other brought, which we now know is not a crystal, and asks if there has been any reaction since the reported one. Sweating, the young man says no, and also reiterates that there were no magical relics nearby to stimulate the reaction of the page fragment. The director then holds the box in his hand and takes a good look at it and the piece of paper. He brings his face very close to the material and gives a long examination of the little thing, murmuring to himself that they need to investigate that. Our student advisor places a hand on his chest and thanks when the director says he has done a great job so far and that the journey is not over yet. Closing the box, the head of the academy calls for his assistant, Elena, who enters the room promptly. With her hands clasped behind her back, the radiant young woman asks the older man what he desires. The elderly gentleman asks her to take that to the Hall of Beginnings, explaining that the first-year students will have a joint class soon. Looking through his window, our dear old man says that he seems to be understanding what is happening there, and that it is rare for such a small fragment to react. He remembers the prophecy that says if the person recorded in the hero's memories appears, the fragments will react. And we have a vision of Leo and the fragment together. In the Great Hall of Lumerne, we see several first-year students sitting in their chairs, and there is someone on stage, behind a small podium with a microphone. The woman on stage is Artian Neer, the advisor for Class 8 and teacher of hero studies for first-year students, and she asks everyone to be quiet and stop murmuring. The extras scattered around the room don't seem to pay much attention to what she is saying and continue laughing, gossiping, and talking about TikTok videos. Changing from her tired, cute vibe, the woman is enveloped by a threatening red energy as she deepens her voice. The students stop talking when they feel the atmosphere of the environment change from water to wine, and she tells them they only have two options at that moment. Screaming into the microphone as if she were a demon with sharp teeth and horns, she says that either they shut up for good or they will get beaten so badly that they'll end up starring in a soap opera on record. Still completely mad with rage, she points to a kid in the audience and asks if he wants to be the first to be dragged up. Screaming into the microphone completely out of control and with her hair a mess, she complains that those delinquents never listen when she's calm and the students are frozen in place. She then stops speaking and has a moment of suspension, as if she realizes something. Returning to her calm demeanor from the beginning of the session, she takes a deep breath and softly says that finally everyone has quieted down. All those present are paralyzed and very confused when she thanks everyone in a very friendly manner. One of the boys in the audience is crying from nerves, thinking about how teachers are always scary, no matter when or where they are seen. Our protagonist is sitting quietly, observing everything as if it were boring, but thinks it's rare to see a spirit summoner, even in the time of his past life. The woman then does like Prajota, pulling out a knife this big and saying they will start the first joint class on hero studies for the first year. Looking closely at the beautiful knife in her hand, she says that after the memories of heroes appeared, families of heroes could be established thanks to that. Running the tip of her finger along the edge of the blade with a cute smile, she explains that to open a hero's world, you need an object connected to that hero. We see the dagger then become enveloped in a different colored energy, and Ardian explains that because of this, descendants of heroes have easier access to those worlds. The woman with white hair explains that this is also why the Lumerne Academy and the families maintain a close connection. It's like having the key and the treasure chest. In all this talk, while our sharp-toothed student is sleeping out of boredom, Leo is smiling confidently, thinking that this is indeed very interesting. At the moment she asks the students if they understand why hero studies are important and they respond that they do, Elena enters the room. Seeing a light show on the presentation slide, she explains that it is precisely the knowledge about heroes that makes it possible for students to conquer their worlds. Smiling kindly as she continues her explanation, she says that when they become final year students, they will be able to choose a hero and try to inherit their power that way. Kalian's assistant stands next to the unbalanced speaker with the little box in hand. The Class 8 counselor starts to introduce the girl, but is interrupted as Elena quickly hands her the box. She then shows the students through the projector the tiny box and says that it is a fragment of a hero's memory that was recovered by the 5th-year students from the dungeon. Everyone goes, "Ooh!" as she carefully opens the box with great suspense. Even I got nervous. The students are sweating cold, somewhat unsure of what to expect. The extras probably don't even have payroll to witness a scene like this. She, quite the trickster, closes the box again to continue speaking, and the students experience an immediate drop in happiness when she says that before they see the fragment, there's something more. The woman then says that they should present what they plan to achieve when they become heroes. The first to raise her hand is, of course, our eager girl Zerdigner, who stumbles over her words saying she wants to surpass the knights of her own family. The teacher says that this is indeed a great goal. Chloe raises her hand too, saying she wants to create a grimoire with a compilation of spells she creates herself, like the one that made her never wear glasses again. One of the extras stands up from his chair and starts to speak, but since he doesn't even have a name, we don't pay much attention to what the poor guy wants. Let's move on to the next. Carl then says that his main goal is to support the other heroes. How sweet. His roommate thinks it's very sweet that the boy really seems like someone who would want to help others, and then he stands up to share his own goal. Placing one hand on the table and striking a protagonist pose, he declares that his main objective is the total annihilation of Erebus. The instructor is somewhat left speechless by that statement. The boy with orange hair is also sweating cold with that revelation, completely at a loss for words. Sejin and Harlan, who are present watching everything, are as shocked as at the end of the soap opera Avenida Brasil, completely paralyzed in shock. When Leo sits back down in the chair, the teacher nervously says that this is a very absurd goal. Congratulations to the crazy person who mentioned it. Some extras sitting behind the boy Plav whisper among themselves that this seems very ambitious for him, and another comments that it makes sense for the favorite to think he can do anything. Sejin and Harlan have a conversation, and the white-haired one asks what the other thinks, and the man with the poorly trimmed beard says that the boy doesn't seem like the type to speak just for the sake of speaking. He explains that even though Erebus has been sealed in various fragments for thousands of years, there have been several resurrections over the years. Pensive, our fringe-haired professor thinks that even the resurgence of the smallest fragment could cause extinction, and that boy wants to completely eliminate Erebus. Close to the microphone, the sly instructor says that the class will be an analysis of the memory fragment of the hero recovered from the dungeons by the 5th-year team. The other instructors are present, and 2 of their unknown colleagues say that the children should not cause a ruckus, but rather discover whose fragment it is and create a strategy. Some unknown students sweat coldly upon seeing that there are other class advisors watching them. Nella and Tade, who seem like twins, are also watching, and the girl is excited to finally focus on a hero's memory, while the boy says he is shaking all over. The speaker resumes and asks that, first, the class leaders stand up and take a step forward. We find out that Class 1 chose our female protagonist as their leader. Leo is obviously one of the other class leaders, as we already knew. After a long time missing, Abad returns to our screen with his silky hair as a class leader as well. Another dear one who also steps forward is the Invocation Girl, our beloved from the Eastern lands named Chen Xia. All these and the other leaders from the other still irrelevant classes gather with the instructors who say that 2 fragments have been recovered, but they will only use 1. When Leo approaches the teacher holding the 2 fragments, we see that they are not so different if it weren't for one being slightly larger than the other. He extends one hand to try to examine one of the pieces more closely. He picks up the torn sheet, and a golden light begins to emanate from the paper, as if it were a magical ring from a fairy king nearby. Our boy then looks at what is happening without much reaction as a message appears to initiate access to the hero's memory. The teacher keeps her eyes closed while the boy stares intently at the paper, and the golden light only intensifies, as a magic circle with inscriptions grows across much of the room. Similar to the admission exam, we still do not know whose world it is, or what that sheet is from. Something seems off because Sejin looks somewhat frightened by all of this, and asks if this is some kind of escape in progress. Golden threads of magic weave through the entire environment, and suddenly none of the attendees are in the room they were in before, but rather in a desolate and strange place. The first thing we see in this unknown world is some large monsters unconscious and sprawled on the stone floor. One of the girls present screams that she sees a giant dog, and that she prefers cats because she is allergic to dogs. Our beloved lazy instructor, who always stands with his feet up, scolds the students, saying that this is a hero's world, and they need to control themselves. The long-haired white tutor points in a direction and tells Harlan that he can see the fortress wall in that direction. We then see what he is talking about. It looks like a fractured castle, and he says that at the time of the catastrophe, that was the last line of defense of the last city. The walls of guard salon. The protagonist seems to understand more or less what is happening and starts to tell Kyle that this is his last wish, and that it is silly, and then an echo occurs. Everyone looks back when someone loudly repeats Leo's words, and then they see a brown-haired woman in a white coat approaching the group. Taking a closer look at the long-haired woman, we see that she resembles several others but is younger, and she says that her silly wish is to save the world. Reina's son stands still, not uttering a single word, looking at the dear one. For a moment, it seems that only the two of them exist in that forgotten battlefield, and then the young man refers to her as his former companion, Lycinas. The former warrior smiles warmly and kindly at the boy upon hearing her name. Suddenly, as if in the blink of an eye, everyone is back in the room they were in before, and most look around not understanding anything. Shia asks the responsible adults what just happened there. The instructor of Class 5 says that everyone is dismissed, that classes are suspended, and that everyone should leave the auditorium immediately. The extras start to leave slowly, murmuring and complaining about everything as always. Still holding the piece of paper in his hand and staring at it intently, he thinks he knows that this is Kyle's hero memory. Zooming in on the piece of paper, he repeats in his mind that this is his hero memory. With his arms crossed, Harlan silently observes the kid as he gets lost in his thoughts. Far away, in one of the classrooms, we hear a loud shout of doubt. Ilyana, Carl, Leo, and Chelsea are gathered there, and the girl with red hair is quite agitated, asking how he saw Lycinas, and Llewellyn is excited about it. The girl with fire powers complains about not being a representative to see what he saw, and that it was a historic event. And our gambler just looks at her and says, babe. She doesn't like the guy's mockery much and prepares to land a solid punch on his head, which he defends himself from while she says that day will be his burial day. Harlan appears at the door just in time and says he knew he had to give a hard time to the loudest class in the academy, but this was too much. Terrifying. He threatens everyone present with his wide eyes and says that if they don't shut up and go study, they will all be expelled. After dropping that bomb, he just closes the door and leaves, and all the students are left in total silence, not understanding what just happened. Quietly to himself, our protagonist wonders why the hell his hero memory is the only one that is a complete mess, and that he barely recognized his own world. He thinks of Lycinas repeating his lines about saving the world someday, and he no longer remembers his gaze, as if they had deliberately destroyed his memory. The boy becomes increasingly introspective and thinks that a memory inherits the power of the hero, and it would have to be someone who wasn't interested in the birth of another like him. Thinking of the dark and dangerous figure from his past, the greatest evil in the world, he concludes that it must be something related to Erebus. Sitting sulkily, he concludes that he first needs to uncover the reason why his memory was divided and messed up like that. A month later, we are transported to the classroom building of the magic department. Len is giving his lesson, and he points to some papers with drawings and writings, saying that this is original, a unique magic, and that doing something similar will be their next test. All the students fall into total silence, with only a few repeating to themselves how they have to construct a unique spell at this point in the game. The adult then explains that this shows the individuality of a sorcerer, and that nowadays this has fallen by the wayside because many are focused only on activations and not creations. He also says that an original magic can become a secret technique that will protect the mage in a critical moment or dangerous situation. We see in a pamphlet that the magic of the elves, known as star magic, is just a mere copy of the original magic that every elf learns. Chloe and Leo pay attention in class, and the girl becomes alert when the man says that only one person mastered the true star magic, and it was its creator, the ancient heroine Luna. She remembers when they were in the game of Bastera, and the boy used exactly that type of magic, but she says nothing about it. The boy with white hair looks at a book on a table, and it catches his attention. It seems to be a book with golden details but a dark purple cover, with a magical circle on the cover. The girl from the north seems to be the one with the book, and she notices how suspicious the boy is, and she starts to sweat cold. He pretends he wasn't looking, but the deer quickly grabs the book and tries to hide it. Definitely the crowd doesn't know how to be subtle in Lumerne. Thoughtful, Leo wonders if that was a grimoire by any chance, and he doesn't pay much attention when the teacher says that to finish the class, they should just get excited to do something new. All the students are then dismissed and start to leave the room, and among them is the girl who was dropping books. The boy then comes up behind her and gently holds her hand, asking her to wait a little. With a disgusted look for being touched by a poor person, the girl remains silent and looks at him coldly. I love this pun. Smiling kindly, he asks if she might be interested in going to lunch with him to chat a bit more. He glances at her bag. The little rascal only cares about two things. One is the grimoire she quickly hid, and the other is why she carries that hideous messenger bag. With a sour expression, the Ice Mage says she doesn't have time to waste on such nonsense and declares she will crush him in the exam, pulling her hand away from his. The boy with orange hair joins the two and tries to break the ice, asking if her roommate is crazy for challenging the top magic student in the next exam. The girl then becomes quite introspective and says she is already catching up to him in terms of techniques, but when it comes to magical techniques, she cannot allow herself to be surpassed. Clenching her fist tightly, she looks at the boys and says that because of this, next time, things will be different. With a petrifying gaze at the boy, she declares that she will be the winner. With a mocking smile on his face, our boy Plav says it would be very shameless of him to give up at that moment, and that it would be disrespectful to her. The girl says nothing, just nods her head in agreement. Extending one hand to her, he then says that it's better for both of them to prepare very well for that exam. She says nothing, just firmly holds the protagonist's hand with a clear expression, showing no reaction. Our dear orange gambler seems to be living in a dream world and thinks their handshake is something related to flirting, believing that's how he will proceed. A few hours pass, and now we see the sun setting behind one of the towers of the academy, the Tower of Heroes. Leo is inside the tower, and we see that it is quite tall with many windows, and he wonders where the entrance to Lumern's secret library might be. While climbing some spiral stairs, looking at the paintings hanging on the walls, he concludes that if he can get in, he might find answers about his memories. Some older girls are descending the same staircase as him, and one of them asks the other if he isn't a first year, and the other replies that he is cute for being there. Still on his way, he is intercepted when someone calls him by name, and he stops to look. Descending the stairs, we find the fifth-year girl with glasses who recovered Kyle's fragment, known as Torua Yan. While chewing her gum, the girl with a red headband tells him that she has heard quite a bit about him from Professor Ren and says it's a pleasure to finally meet him. Bowing in respect to his upperclassman, he thanks her. The older girl then steps into his path and asks what business a first-year student would have in the Tower of Heroes. With an absurdly shameless look, he gazes deeply into her eyes and says he is only there to meet the student council president, known as his dear little cousin. The girl pops her bubble gum and stares at him from head to toe, suspiciously. We see an angle pointing to the top of the tower as she says that if he joins the magic department, he will have that chance, and he replies that he is already taking the classes. She gives a confident and almost friendly smile, but initially says nothing. The dear girl then steps aside and clears the way for our boy Plav, who thanks her. As the boy climbs the steps and passes by her, Jan says she would like him to declare magic as his main major by the end of the semester. Turning to look at the boy with her threatening red gaze, she says she hopes she has been very clear. Our protagonist looks at her with a friendly smile on his face, saying not a single word. We see that he continues climbing the steps of life on this endless staircase. And then, he reaches the end and sees that there is still an elevator from which some other students from the magic department are exiting. Entering the elevator, he then presses the button for the 9th floor. He then spends some time there pressing the button repeatedly, and nothing seems to happen, which leaves the boy very frustrated. Confused and without stopping to press the button for even a second, he loudly asks why the hell that isn't working. A random person appears and explains to him that he needs to channel mana when pressing the button and that this is how the elevator for Leo is activated using his own mana. Our boy turns to see who owns the greenish mana, and the very tall person says it's a pleasure to finally meet the famous first year. Smiling, we find the 5th-year veteran who is on the mission to recover the fragment, Zoma, kindly saying that he has heard many things about the rookie from the Plav clan.
So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.